Is the review process broken? Well, hello and welcome to Triangle Square, the PlayStation podcast. I'm your host, Brett Beck, and alongside me is a mister who's pointing his finger at a screen, blaming our other host.
No.
I'm kidding.
I think our audio glitched.
I don't know. Chris, did you start making the noise for the intro?
I mean, it's definitely possible. Yeah.
Well, that just means our intro is infectious. So
Saul Bridges here with Lucky Episode 233. And alongside me is Mr.
Oh, Chris Figs. I remember this time.
You did it. You did the thing.
What's going to be hilarious about this episode, you're going to hear me in the thing. I'm so used to it being cut like it's not part of the thing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I could cut that audio out, and I normally do. But like last week, I don't know if you saw me actually edit you in with the slapping your butt.
The
because I 100% did in video form.
I'm going to watch this. This is going to be hilarious.
So if you miss that and you don't normally watch video and you just want a good chuckle, just watch like the first 30 seconds. Just destroy our YouTube algorithm. It doesn't matter. Speaking of YouTube, if you like the show, like and subscribe and share it with your friends. Whether or not you're on video format with YouTube or if you just listen on podcast services, slap a review down. Let your friends know. Give it a like. Whatever you can do to help it. But we're going to get into the show the right way as we always do. If you are new to us, welcome. Hope you enjoy the show. But Chris, I'm going to lob it towards you, man. What you been playing this week? I know the answer.
I finished Death Stranding.
Yeah.
And I've been playing Far Cry 6.
Have you now? Did you enjoy that, Saul? Saul just went back and watched the video edit.
That's good.
Good times. So I want to talk about two things there because one of those games I've played and the other one I haven't. So let's start with the positive. I know that you have been absolutely loving Death Stranding as the past few weeks of this show have talked about. Now that you've beat it, how do you feel about it?
It's top 3 of last gen, like by far.
So what's your other two that are in that top 3?
Persona 5 Royal, Days Gone, Death Stranding.
Okay. So are you kind of struggling right now as to where you feel like Days Gone, where all 3 of those games actually lie in order for you?
No, not really. It's Persona 5 Royal and then like 50 steps down and then it's Days Gone and then Death Stranding.
How many steps between Days Gone and Death Stranding?
Like half.
Half a step.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that means that Death Stranding as a new experience really came in clutch there for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, listen, I love everything about Death Stranding. I think the gameplay is significantly better than the story. The gameplay is much better than the story.
You hear that, Kiki? He said it with some stank on his voice too, so it was just like, I want you to know.
I never look into the camera, and I'm looking directly into the camera.
You are. Right, it looks like you're peering into my soul because I'm looking at the screen. Kiki, look, I'm looking directly at the camera for you as well. Now, so coming off of it, one of the weird things that people always talk about with Death Stranding, and why I think that the idea of giving a trial is a really good idea, is that Death Stranding is a very odd game. I think it's hard to convince someone that it's an amazing experience outside looking in. So if you had to kind of sell the game to someone who has never played it because they've been thinking that they might be turned off by the way that it's shown, how would you what would you suggest to someone as a reason to go through and play it? Like if you had to quick sell the game.
It's hard because I really like the story. I'm sure later down the line we can really talk about it, but I think the story is kind of shallow, personally. So for me, it's really just I really like walking across that map. I really do. Like I was telling you guys, as I'm going for the platinum now, I wanted to build the zipline network. And I didn't realize that there was a limit on building because I spent my 50-hour playthrough never building anything. I just walked and drove everywhere.
Yeah.
So that's how I would sell. I just think it's very relaxing. I've watched 4 seasons of Chuck while playing this game. Like it's awesome.
So here's the thing. I get, and I mean, it's definitely something we should talk about kind of more in depth later when we're not worrying about spoiling or anything like that. Maybe in the right context, we were discussing potentially coming back and doing a spoiler chat for that. At least you and Saul, maybe all 3 of us. But when kind of saying like you're looking at the story being shallow, I mean, clearly, I know that you liked the story. The moments when the story was firing on all cylinders for you. But it's interesting to me, I guess, because of the way you were playing, it facilitated your ability to kind of multitask that way.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, when you're just walking and driving long stretches and you're not really finding ways to strategically speed up your deliveries to where you can finish the game in, you know, more like 30 hours as opposed to 50.
Yeah.
I mean,
for me, it was more like, I would pause my TV show when I was done walking and there was a cutscene coming in. So it's not like I wasn't paying attention to the story. It just, for me, I was spending so much time just walking, and then it was like, oh, I'm going to the wind farm, and there's a lost cargo 20 meters over there and 100 meters down the road, and that kind of stuff. So I just spent my time picking stuff up and just being who I imagine Sam would actually be. I don't know. Did you want me to expand on the story? Why?
No. You don't have to. You know, you don't have to expand about the story because I think that regardless of how anybody feels about the story, and depending on what you actually end up kind of honing in as being the thing that you love about Death Stranding, I don't want to ruin that for anybody. Realistically,
no.
You know?
I think the only thing I'll say is that I predicted the story to almost perfect accuracy like a week and a half ago.
Yeah, I also predicted the story fairly early on. And I don't want to say all of it, right? But like the main crux of the story was predicted fairly early on in the experience for me. Now, some of the other stuff, no, of course, more like lore as to why we're here and expanding on that. And of course, I didn't really guess all that, but you know, that's a different thing. But you know, the weird thing about being able to guess a story is that if the journey to get there is still good enough,
absolutely,
you don't care. Yeah.
My thing was it felt like a lot of more surface level, like it felt like one of those things where you look at an ocean, you're like, oh, that's going to be so deep. I don't know if I can stand in there. And then you get in and it doesn't even reach your knees. That's kind of how the story felt to me, where it feels really deep, but then it's like, oh, okay. I guess this wasn't as deep as I thought.
I don't know that I disagree with that. I think that there's a lot of really interesting character stories, but it's a lot of very individual, interesting character stories that have a loose connection to each other. And so I think that's not a bad, and I don't even think that has to be like a bad thing.
No, it's not a negative.
Yeah, but it's definitely different than I think what most people would be outside looking and thinking is that here's this game where I walk and then have to get into crazy deep amounts of lore and story and stuff. And you're right. It's not that complicated. It's not that hard to understand. It is odd and very unique. But, you know, kind of just comes on where you're coming from. So the other game you've been playing, Far Cry 6, is now the time to get into the fact that, as far as I could tell, neither of us really like Far Cry 6.
I guess so, yeah. I will say I spent more time with it yesterday when I wasn't being dragged back to Death Stranding. Because Saul was right. By the time I got to, like, Mama and Lockney, I was in. I didn't do any other side stuff. I just went for it. But so I finished that and I played, I think, like 2-3 hours of Far Cry yesterday, and I didn't dislike it as much. But I will say I still skipped the cutscenes. I think the story sucks, and I don't care about any of these characters. Is even Giancarlo Esposito. I think he's bad in this game, actually.
Well, the thing about like this, specifically the Castillo part of this and Giancarlo Esposito's part within it, I don't know that he's bad. I genuinely think it might be the order in which they chose to tell this story makes me not care or find much weight in what he's doing. It gets better as you keep going. Like, I'm not sure where you actually are, but by the time I got to the end of the first, or to where I could go to the mainland and actually start there, I was like, oh, I'm like 1% under, like, okay, maybe he's an all right villain, but the rest of it's just like, okay, this is just like a cardboard cutout of evil person doing evil things. Right. And there's no real reason as to why. I think that this game has the potential for a really interesting story. And I say that in the sense of not that it missed it. I think the potential for the beginning being more interesting is far more possible because I've experienced that. But by the time the story draws to an end, it might be amazing. But I find that right now, this game has to deal with a thing that most of the other Far Cries don't have to deal with. Normally, you're coming into something as the first time, and it's like it's new to your character, and so it's new to you, and that game presents it in that way. And I think Far Cry 6 is weighed down by this fact that Danny, our character here, First of all, I think that they made a poor choice by making it to where you could be a male or a female. I think they really needed to stick with a single character and then really lean heavily into why that character has certain character traits and physical traits or whatever it is that tells them and informs why they feel the way they do. But I also think that seeing these people who have clearly been entrenched in this for so long and us coming in the middle of it, unlike the normal Far Cry stories, what they're used to writing, we're already in the thick of it. We're coming in the thick of it. Whereas, like, think Far Cry 5. It's, okay, these cultists have kind of been around for a while, but this is their real big moment of their push. And then you think about Far Cry 3. It's like, okay, there's people who are vacationing on an island, and guess what? This is their first time getting popped into this thing where they're kidnapped, and this is what's going on here. And Far Cry 4, this is Ajay's first time coming back to his home and realizing what it was like. So I just think that this game has a very different way of dealing with it. And there's that, but then there's something that Saul, whenever he came over and watched it, is definitely true. This game, like every Ubisoft game, is slowly getting for me every time I play it. Doesn't mean they're bad. It's just, it takes me out of it. It has this Ubisoft ubiquitousness to it. Pun not intended necessarily. But, you know, you have this thing where it feels like every other Ubisoft game that I've played. Like, Saul was watching me play it for not even 5 minutes. It was like, that just looks like Breakpoint.
It looks exactly like a copy of Breakpoint. It looks like everything they've made. It's too bland, and it does not like a next gen game.
That's also true, which I don't think has to be a big death knell, but it does. That game looks rough sometimes.
It does at a $70 price point.
It was 60, right?
Yeah, it was 60. I didn't
for
pay
the PS5 version.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's better then.
Yeah, it is better. If it was 70, then yeah, a little bit more. I mean, it runs well when you're playing it. But Chris, have you noticed that the cutscenes drop frames? Oh, I guess you've been skipping.
I was going to say I haven't noticed because I haven't watched them.
Yeah, it drops frames like crazy. But you know, all that aside, it's really that I'm not drawn to do anything in the game.
No,
like I don't even find like, okay, Chris, you said something in the Discord the other day that I think is interesting, and I do mostly agree with it. That the Far Cry for the longest time has had one of the most consistent brand identities, and game to game it's pretty consistent. Even even when 5 shook a lot of stuff up, it still felt like Far Cry. I mean, I missed some of the things from the previous entries, but it wasn't like enough to make me go, this doesn't feel like Far Cry. And that's still true here, but I don't know if I'm just kind of losing it, because like, you know, I liked 5. If you go back and listen, I liked 5 a lot when I first played it. And I think it was just because I was, you know, in that mood. And then, like, not long after, I started thinking, I'm like, man, 5 is not really that good of a game.
No.
And by the time that I'm at now, I'm like, I don't really like 5. I had fun with it, but my fun was just tied to something, you know, a little different. It wasn't what I really would have wanted out of a Far Cry game, despite the fact that I feel like it is true to the brand identity for the most part.
I think for me with Far Cry, I was talking to Ayers, and he was talking about how it doesn't have an identity. And I think the crux of the issue with this game is that if I gave you a copy of Far Cry 3 and I was like, play this, and then I gave you a copy of Far Cry 6 and I said, play this, you would you wouldn't skip a beat. There would be nothing in these games that's like, oh, I don't know what this is. This is Far Cry. It's the same game as 3, which is the same game as 4, which is the same game as 5, which is close to New Dawn, and is absolutely nothing like Primal, which is the best one on last gen. So,
and also Primal's the only one that actually shakes up the formula quite a bit. Exactly. And it still manages to feel like a Far Cry game.
Exactly. So that's what my problem is, and I think that's the issue with 6 and even 5 is where the games are so close to being the same that they're the same, which is I think an issue, because you get fatigued on it very quickly. You're like, oh, I just did this, even though it's in a different place and a different, you know, character, it feels the same.
Well, yeah, right. And then you have this thing where the lack of originality is what starts smacking you. Because I told somebody, I audibly groaned at my TV when I got to the drug field and I had a flamethrower and I had to catch it on fire. I said, haven't I done this 18 times in this series?
We talked about this when we were playing Phasmo, and Danny literally goes, "That felt familiar." And I said to him, like, why? Why does that feel familiar to you? It feels familiar to me because I've done it 6 times. Why does it feel familiar to you? Do you burn fields of pot all the time? What is wrong with you? This isn't funny.
Yeah. I know it's break the fourth wall kind of stuff, but I don't know, because I was already annoyed at that being there, like, and not even like in the game, right? You could have given me a few hours before you gave me the quintessential Far Cry task. You know what I mean? Like, come on, dude. Like, okay, look, a good example, right? Of how to do a joke the right way. Far Cry 5, for all the things I don't like about it, do you remember that you had to climb exactly 1 radio tower?
Yeah.
At the very beginning of the game, and there's a joke in there about how, don't worry, you only have to do this once.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a way to joke about something that you've done in the past, but also having the solution of it. Okay, but now you're not doing it anymore. It's our final hurrah with that. Instead, this game's just like, burn a drug field, and you're probably going to do it 18 more times, big buddy.
And the thing is, like, they could do stuff like, even that joke is like a microcosm of the whole game, right? Where it's just lazy. Because if they had done that and then it was like, oh, you're burning these pot fields and you get high and all of a sudden it's like, hey, it turns into the Far Cry 3 field, you know, and the dubstep is popping up, the Skrillex soundtrack is playing, and then it was like, that felt weird. That would have been like, that's funny. That's
more
cool.
tongue in cheek. Yeah.
Instead, it was this completely separate, not even the same type of thing you're burning. You're burning weed in 3, and you're burning poison tobacco in 6.
That cures cancer. Also, I've been trying to figure out this situation.
It causes cancer if you get touched by it. That's what I gathered.
Well, yeah, but in terms of what Castillo is marking it as, the Viviro or whatever, is like the opening cutscene, I'm pretty sure sells it as a cancer cure.
Yeah,
and yet we're being told that to grow it, they pour chemicals on it that actively cause cancer.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's just a very lazy game that I think I'll get through, because sometimes in the right mood, it's fun to play. Because in the end, Far Cry is fun. Stealth killing people with long range weapons and being over, fun. But nothing else matters. Nothing else is fun.
Guys, 1 second. I hate to tell y'all, I got my daughter today because my wife is out brunching. Kyrie, do you need something? I'm not sure. Hey, you boys talk however you want. I'm going to go help my daughter real quick. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Enjoy.
So, Chris, I've been playing Metal Gear Solid 5.
Have you?
We've been talking so much about Metal Gear Solid. I hopped back on Metal Gear Solid 5.
Great game.
And have been playing. I'm only into I'm into the second real main mission of Chapter 1 after tackling the 3 side ops you get. And I love that game so much. I'm actually planning on beating it this time, though, because I played
it before.
No, I played over 100 hours of that game, and I never beat it. I got to.
So did you get spoiled on the ending?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to say,
but
I'd like to hear how you felt about that.
Yeah, I got spoiled on the ending, but in a way that I don't know the full details, other than I do. I put everything together in terms of the story, how it concludes. But yeah, I got to the part the first time I ever played it. I got to a part in the story where it felt like it should have started coming down to a close, but then it just kept going.
Yeah.
Which
when you're in the back of a car.
Yes, absolutely. And that plus the battle after, I'm like, okay, this is getting towards the end of the game. No, there's still so much. And I played 10 to 12 hours past that, I think, maybe a little bit less. And
Metal Gear Solid 5.
Yeah. And I started up 6 months ago to do the same thing, but something came out and took my attention. So now, without really much, I plan on finishing up this. At the same time, I'm still tackling Dragon Quest 11, but I plan on finishing up this, and then early November starting The Last of Us Remastered, and then getting into The Last of Us 2, and then by the end of September, or at least Thanksgiving week, starting Death Stranding.
Okay.
So I actually started up The Last of Us 2, and I was immediately, the opening of that, they said something, and I was like, is that an absolute? Did they actually say that in the first game? And I'm like, I don't remember enough of the first game in terms of the story to be able to know that for sure or not. So I'm going back and playing it. But I also used to play The Last of Us 1 yearly.
Yeah, but I say it was your seasonal game for a hot minute.
Every time like October would roll around the corner, I'd play it. But I haven't done that in like 3 years. It's been maybe even longer than that. Maybe even 4 years.
Yeah. Well, see, that was like, and The Last of Us is a little easier pill to swallow in that regard, but you still get to this point where it's like you have other stuff going on. You're like, I don't really know if I want to dedicate that time anymore. Because I used to play Kingdom Hearts 1 yearly, and that's just 24 hours that I'm like, dude, do I really want to do that when I could spend 24 hours playing not Far Cry 6? But yeah. I pretty much have just done Far Cry 6 and Alan Wake, and it's interesting because the two games are very different for me. I feel like I don't really love or hate. I'm just kind of indifferent about the mechanics of Alan Wake. I find them to be kind of clumsy, but the story and characters are so interesting. And then Far Cry 6 feels fine mechanically and gunplay speaking, but I don't give a crap about the story or the characters. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. But Chris, I don't know if you noticed, I downloaded Prey the other day.
I did notice, yes.
And it has taken everything in my power to not just forsake every game I'm playing and to start playing Prey. So that's where I'm at right now. We'll see what happens. I think I'm probably going, I'm not say probably, I'm definitely going to ride Alan Wake through to the end. I may give one more couple hour gaming stint to Far Cry, and if it doesn't pull me in, I think I'm jumping, abandoning ship. I don't think I care enough. I want to give it the chance, but man, I don't have the time to waste when there's other things that are on my mind, you know?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure once Guardians comes out, if I'm not into Far Cry,
you're gonna quit.
I'm just done. Yeah.
And Guardians is close.
2 weeks,
right?
I think. Yeah, 2-ish.
Ooh. Okay, yeah, we're gonna see what happens. If Far Cry, I'll tell you right now, Far Cry 6 makes a miraculous turnaround in from my standpoint on it, then I would be very surprised. Because right now I don't know. Like, I'm trying to give it its due, but I honestly could quit playing it right now and I would never miss anything about it. And that's unfortunate. But oh well. All right, guys, I think we're gonna go ahead and head into the news. And this week around, I'm going to tell you, news is a little interesting. It's different. There's not a lot of great stuff, but there's been a couple of interesting things. First thing, a roughly 30-second clip of Elden Ring gameplay, supposedly running on an Xbox One, has leaked, showcasing a wide open world with forest, mountains, and wastelands that you can seemingly explore at will, as well as the game edition of a compass system situated at the top of the screen as a means to help with navigation, likely. So very much looking like peering into a FromSoft game with more contemporary design elements that we've seen in gaming a lot recently. So Saul, I know that you had talked about that this had actually been teased or leaked or whatever a while back, and people were thinking it was green screened of Dark Souls footage, which clearly it's not.
Pretty much.
Because there is a free jump. Unless that's a modded Dark Souls.
So
like what it was like 2 months ago, 3 months ago, it was a very, very low resolution of somebody filming on like a computer screen. And it was literally the same exact thing of like the pan around, the going to the rock and jumping on the rock. It was the same thing, but people were convinced that it was. I'll have to show you the Ring City DLC has an opening part that has a yellow sky.
Oh, and they thought it was kind of.
Yeah, and people thought that that's kind of what it came from, and then they just thought that they modded in a jump button or something, or hacked in a jump button. But there's literally a part in the opening of the Ring City that has that kind of yellowy background, and people thought it was that, and it wasn't until now that like we see it clearly, like actually clearly, to see that the background actually had that tree in it, because you couldn't even make that out. And then that footage was just gone. Like deleted and gone. So whoever leaked that, I have a feeling is who leaked this.
You know, every time that one of those videos come out, I think to myself, modern phones have such good cameras. How are we getting such a low res version of this from a phone?
Like a flip phone in Japan or something. I don't know what they're recording this stuff on.
Well, it's either that or like they're recording the video and then sending it through text, so it's compressing like crazy, and then someone's uploading it.
Or like emailing it to
why
themselves,
would you
like
do
6
that?
different times to like cut a trail.
Fun fact, if they recorded it on an Android phone through a third-party app, it doesn't work because Android phones in third-party apps only screen record your camera. So that's why they always look like crap. Yeah, because they can't build out camera functions for every Android phone. So all it really does in the third, like if you make a video in TikTok, it just screen records your phone. That's why every video an Android sends is crap.
And then you send it to somebody else on Android, and then they send it to somebody else, and that's how this stuff ends up so
trail of
compressed.
compression.
Yeah,
it's getting better with actually having the Android wide, or really it's carrier wide text sending, where you can actually do all the same things that Apple does with iMessage, where it's like you've read it, you've done this, and it doesn't cap out. It's more like it's just Messenger through text. But for a long time, Android was rough, and it still has its issues in that particular regard. Yeah,
I think this looks great, though. You know, I'm not a massive fan of the compass, but I can't say that for certainty.
It's like you haven't run around. It's like, is it needed?
Yeah, is that map that big that I need a compass? Because if it's not, I don't like that. I prefer like Souls games to like drop you in and be like, where do I go?
But see, that's the big thing here, right? Is that this is the first open world.
Yeah,
not open hub. You know,
even though it's arguable that the Ring City has an area in that DLC, like from one bonfire down. It's like a bonfire downstairs through a swamp. It's pretty big. It's actually pretty massive.
Very wide. Yeah. Which, I mean, and then you look at something like Sekiro. Sekiro is very, I don't want to say it's tunneled, because I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's very, the map design is made to naturally lead the player to move toward a certain direction.
Yeah, linear forward, with the exception of one area in that game. There's that area that has like the dragon boss.
I don't think I got that.
Minor spoilers for anybody who doesn't care about bosses or cares about bosses.
I thought about going back, since it runs a lot better on next gen consoles, and trying to play it again. But yeah, across the board, I think it looks good, and it's so weird that it looks like I see, and there's clearly other games too, but I definitely see where them talking about like Breath of the Wild comes in here. There is some of that feel and vibe to the way that you kind of go when you pan the camera across and you see like this disparate region connecting with this disparate region connecting with this one.
I'm obviously excited for it. So
my big question here is that, are they actually, when you're dealing with compasses, I always think of like Skyrim and Elder Scrolls being the quintessential early compass games that kind of made this generation really switch to them. But what you come into there is like, is it going to actually put like your objectives on the compass, or is it going to be a little more hands off and kind of be like, well, we're going to, you'll be able to figure out and kind of reference the map and figure out which direction it is from you. Kind of like Sea of Thieves, where it's like you go down, you look at the map, and you're like, it's northeast of us. And the compass doesn't show anything other than northeast. And you got to keep thinking of, okay, it's got to keep going northeast and I'll find it.
Maybe so, yeah. Or maybe, I kind of hope it's very vague.
The question here is that, is Elden Ring a evolution and a growing of them wanting to keep the same game mechanics kind of moving forward, but open them up and put them wide? Or is this kind of partially their push into making a more commercially normal game?
No, from what I saw there, that the way that game looks in just a couple seconds, you can, if you're familiar with it enough, you can see that looks like a Souls game. That looks like
I agree. I'm just saying, like, is this like one of the first little things of like, we'll concede here to make a more commercially normal game? Because you think about a game like Bloodborne, right? It's a critically acclaimed game, and a lot of people love it, but that game still only sold a little over 2 million copies. Now, Dark Souls 3, on the other hand, sold significally better.
Yeah, but then you're getting into the weeds to talk about sales.
Oh, yeah, but I just mean like a commercial. That's what I was talking about a second ago. Is this a thing of like, we'll concede on this hill so that we have a chance of being a more commercially huge game? Not viable, because viable all depends on budget, right? Bloodborne at 2 million sales made plenty of money because it was budgeted in such a way that they knew what they were making.
They've already made 5 games. And they haven't really changed anything. I don't think that's their reasoning behind it.
I don't think they would either. But
I just think it's
also a very big change up for them, while still maintaining a style that's
then
in line with the rest of it. Because I don't think, like, there's nothing similar about Armored Core to any of these other games. No. You know what I mean? But they also haven't made an Armored Core game in forever.
If I can't Fortnite dance over the god of an Elder One in Bloodborne 2, then I don't know what they're doing. They're going to have emotes.
Yeah, we'll see. I definitely don't think it's them trying to lean towards a more commercially normal style of game, but it is interesting seeing this big open world, and I'm curious as to what their motivation was there. Was it like their own, like, we want to challenge ourselves to see if we can make interesting content in a much bigger scale?
It's interesting with FromSoft games and that in general, because they use and recycle a lot of their own assets, like sound effects and stuff like that. Actually, speaking of sound effects, for those that are have been watching Squid Game, there's a Bloodborne sound effect in that opening sequence. Squid Game.
That's not surprising considering the little thing that showed the Squid Game creator or whatever saying that he used the shapes in Squid Game because he's a fan of PlayStation.
Yeah.
And the reason there wasn't an X is because all systems share the X button, but he specifically likes PlayStation.
It's like, screw the Xbox.
So like, screw Xbox and Nintendo. I don't want to show anything for them. It was just very interesting. So
yeah, I the second I saw that on like the little they do those symbols on little business cards. Not really a big spoiler, but that's 100%. I wonder if this is it. No, I don't know what this is. But there's like a oh, this is what is this? I can't stand videos that play in browser things. But yeah, for those that if you watch the opening of Squid Game, you'll hear it's the same sound effect when you spawn into an area. Like it's a swing sound.
Well, I will say there was a time when Chris and I were doing Hobbs and Shaw for the movie podcast, Midweek Matinee coming back around very soon. I swore, and I still swear, that they used the transformer like little sound during one thing, and I went back and I hear it every single time, and I'm like, dude, there's no way, because they're not even owned remotely by the same people. But
yeah.
So what I'm getting at is I think sometimes your brain may hear what it wants to. So anyway, that's interesting. I know, Chris, you'll end up buying the game and then never playing it. That's just
pretty sure I won't have to buy this one.
Oh, you seem pretty confident there that I'll be buying this, huh?
I'm not buying Elden Ring. I don't like from soft games.
I know you don't, and yet you love Bloodborne.
I should rephrase. I like every other from soft game, so realistically, this is the one that I'm gonna like. But
you should play Dark Souls 3 if you haven't.
I beat Dark Souls 3.
Okay,
and he beat Bloodborne.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't like Sekiro.
I can play them. I just don't enjoy them as much as I thought I did.
Yeah, every time. I don't know. I'm probably not gonna. And then what? Oh, I bought Mortal Shell. Okay, cool. Thanks, man.
Mortal Shell was before I'd come to realize that I just don't like them. I was like, this looks awesome. I love these.
And it is awesome. It's a very good game.
It's definitely awesome to someone.
Okay, next thing up, let's see. DC Fandome has come and went and brought with it new trailers for both Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, and Gotham Knights. Both trailers were story focused, not giving much extra insight on gameplay, which still remains to be like a big thing of what are these games actually going to look like. We've seen a little bit more of gameplay from Gotham Knights, where we've seen zero gameplay from Suicide Squad, but the trailers showcase the Court of Owls coming into play in Gotham Knights, and our titular Suicide Squad in their trailer kind of showing more of the action in play and affirming a 2022 release date for both titles. Now, here's two things here. First of all, I think both games continue to show Rocksteady have really good lip syncs. Like when you look at their character facial animations, they've always been consistently good for the time period. And both, even though the other one's WB Montreal, the facial animation on Penguin in the trailer for Court of Owls stuff, surprisingly good. And then, of course, I was really blown away, even though it's technically CG trailers or, video clips, whatever you want to call it, of like Harley Quinn's facial animations and whatnot. They looked really good. Big question here, though, for you guys. Did you watch these trailers?
Yes.
No.
Okay, so Chris,
Mm-hmm.
Am I crazy, or does Suicide Squad look like it definitely has like the heart and spirit of Sunset Overdrive?
I can see it, yeah.
Like the entire trailer, I was like, this looks really cool. And it also reminds me of the way that they marketed for Sunset Overdrive. Like song choice, stylistic placement of camera while like slapstick humor happens and stuff,
Yeah. I don't know. Suicide Squad didn't move the needle for me at all. Gotham Knights looks excellent, but Suicide Squad is meh.
Well, still problem there is I don't know what I'm getting into with Suicide Squad. Like it looks all right, but I feel like I just watched a movie trailer, if I'm being dead honest.
I agree.
Whereas I feel like because we've seen a little bit of Gotham Knights gameplay, and then it feels a little bit more like what we've gotten in the past. Not in a bad way. It still feels like it's moving the needle. And then, of course, Court of Owls are just sick, right? So you have this thing where I'm a little more drawn into that as well. And it's funny because I would have thought the opposite. I would have thought that I'd be more into the thing that Rocksteady was doing, but I still don't know what they're doing. And I'm still trying to figure out, like, is this like you're talking about? Is this like is this like a Avengers style game? What is it? You know, do you play as everybody? Do you only play as one? Do you play as people based off of what you choose? Like, I mean, do you choose to run through the story with one character?
I'm going to double check, but I'm 100% sure this is a live service game. So
I don't feel like they've said that, but if they have, then that's good, because at least it'll kind of move my expectation the right direction.
Apparently it was a rumor, but
well, then we'll see if that rumor pans out.
The rumor is Suicide Squad is a live service game and a timed Epic exclusive. So
here's the other thing. I guess, would you consider, if while we're comparing the two, as I was a second ago, would you consider Avengers to be a live service game? Because some people don't think so. I definitely would consider it.
It's 100% a live service game.
Yeah, I think so as well. We'll definitely see what ends up happening. I'm much like you, Chris. Right now, I'm actually a little more excited for Gotham Knights. We'll see what ends up happening.
Yeah, I mean, the Court of Owls is like an all-time. Like, we can talk about the Joker all you want, but the Court of Owls is the best.
It's
Batman.
awesome.
The only reason I upvoted this in Discord was to tell everybody to have an opportunity to tell everybody, go read Court of Owls if you haven't. That is one of, if not my favorite, Batman.
Dude, what a sick special edition too, where you get the Court of Owls mask.
It's a shame that mask is real flimsy.
Yeah, right. It's like very well made.
It's very thin plastic, like you would get for like a child's Halloween mask.
Yeah,
but yeah,
still really cool design.
It is.
If you don't want to wear it,
for like $20, yeah, it's almost free at that point.
Yeah. Am I wrong in thinking that whenever they did the New 52 Joker, where he stapled his face back on, did they do a version of a run of the comic that had a Joker like staple mask that you could get?
Yeah, they did.
I thought so. I thought I remembered seeing
it. Wasn't New 52 though. I don't think it was.
Was that not New 52?
It's New 52.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah.
Yep.
Which they're already off of New 52 now, but right? I'm pretty sure they are. Yeah, they've already moved along again. But
yeah, it was Death in the Family, wasn't it? They came with a special edition thing.
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
Is Death in the Family considered New 52?
There's 2 deaths in the family now.
What are they? I hate DC so much.
I love DC.
These dog trash when they come to this stuff.
I mean, it's just a retelling of the same story with the different characters. Like, it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like what happens if you put new characters in this situation. The whole idea of New 52 was like similar storylines with new variations of characters, Yeah, right. That was kind of like the spirit of it.
Yeah, exactly. And then they went wild with how they decided to explain that whole thing.
Yeah, it was very odd, but
they want $65 for this.
I know they moved off of it very quickly. That's the thing. Like, New 52 came and went, I feel like, quicker than any other new arc stone in any comic thing I've ever seen. And I didn't know if it was because of Flack, because there was actually some interesting storytelling in there and like some interesting new ideas, but there were some weird ones too. I mean, even Marvel has their moments where everybody was like, "You made Captain America into a Nazi." I know, right?
Hail Hydra. There's only I've only seen one instance where Captain America being a Hydra agent works. So,
All right. Next thing up in the news: Capcom are celebrating Resident Evil's 25th anniversary, and as such, have 7 more Resident Evil-based reveals for the month, 2 of which have already come, so there was 9 total. 3 are happening on the 21st, very close. 2 happening on the 22nd, and then 1 each for the 25th and the 29th. The reveals may not be huge, as the other 2 starting reveals were already filled out, and they're, of course, a competition to win Resident Evil branded merch. And then the second was just a reminder about Resident Evil 4's VR port. So I don't really consider those to be reveals as much as like, hey, remember that Resident Evil exists, and please go watch it or play it or whatever. I'm very likely expecting there to be a new trailer for the Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City movie. That's probably one of the 2. There might be something for the Netflix series that we're supposed to be getting. So if you just keep going down, I would not have super high expectations. Keep them in check, but you might get something interesting. I would imagine we're not going to see anything really interesting for Resident Evil in like a big way from the gaming space until they're ready to show 4's remake.
Well, that's what I'm hoping for.
They could do here.
Yeah,
It could. It would be really interesting.
It'd be a nice capper.
Also, even though it wasn't like a surprise or anything, I will say, dude, Resident Evil 4's VR port looks sick.
Yeah,
it looks really good, and I'm super bummed that it's exclusive.
Yeah, for now. Maybe
for now.
PSVR 2.
Yeah, we'll see. That'd be really cool.
I actually think Oculus might have paid for that, like paid for the development. I'm not sure how I read about that.
Well, if so, then yeah, maybe not. Who knows? Sony could just pay for their own development of Resident Evil 4 VR PlayStation.
Please make another one.
Please do the same thing, slightly different, so we don't get sued. I mean, you can't sue. I mean, who's going to sue? Capcom going to sue themselves for making a similar game that someone else paid for?
Yeah, Oculus, I guess, could seek legal action.
I guess if PlayStation can prove that they just completely did all new code for everything, even if it played the same,
yeah,
we're not using the code you paid for. You know,
valid point.
Who knows? I'm not really sure how legal situations like that work, but that's okay. I guess you could probably argue that it confuses people as to which version. You know?
Yeah.
Anyway, so how y'all feeling about Resident Evil as a whole right now?
Iffy.
I don't know. 8 was fine. 7's great. 2 and 3. 2 is one of the best games of last gen, probably.
And then 3 is a solid.
And 3 is a solid, far too expensive, but good.
I do think that there was zero reason for 3 to be $60.
Yeah, that was insane.
And actually cut content from the original game is the crazier part.
I got the platinum in that in one sitting.
Yeah, that's crazy. That is insanity. But hey, you know what? Whatever. If that's what people want to do, that's fine.
Hey, listen, all right,
next thing
3 has Jill.
3, yeah, that's true. Next thing up, Dying Light 2 developer Techland have taken to Twitter to respond to a user asking for Dying Light 1 to update for 4K 60 frames per second support on next-gen consoles. The official Dying Light page replied saying that they are currently, quote, currently working on a next-gen patch for Dying Light 1. More details coming in the future, end quote. So I'm assuming that relatively soon players will be able to revisit the first game or hop in for the first time with enhanced backwards compatibility soon. But at the same time, this is the same company that showed off Dying Light 2 like 2 years ago, and it's still getting delayed again. So do with that information what you will. Chris, you have anything about that? I know you were a big Dying Light fan, right? I think I saw you just reinstall Dying Light 1, right?
I did actually just reinstall Dying Light 1. Literally because I'm like, well, if they're going to do this, I might as well try and sync my trophies up to get 2 platinums.
Okay.
But no, I love Dying Light 1. I feel like for some reason the news has caused me to say one of the best games of last gen multiple times, but one of the best games of last gen.
Well, hey,
you've now heard my top 5 of last gen.
Yeah. Well, there you go. I never played Dying Light. But I don't know. I've heard good things about it. I remember seeing them consistently updated. I think if nothing else, right, regardless of how they've handled Dying Light 2 from a reveal to release standpoint, Dying Light 1 was like that thing where it was kind of like revealed and released very quickly and then supported forever. And I've very seldom seen games other than like No Man's Sky receive that level of support for an entire generation. And that's impressive. And they should be rewarded for that. It's just, yeah, it definitely, they've had a rough time. Techland and sequels are just not where it's at, you know? Because Dead Island and then Dead Island 2, that still doesn't exist. And that wasn't even them, right? But they started Dead Island at least.
Yeah, one of them, yeah.
Yeah, and then they move on to whatever this game I just said is. Why can't I think right now?
Dying Light 2.
Yeah, Dying Light. But yeah, it's interesting that they seem to have very odd. Like they do great for the first game, and then it's just like, okay, we'll see what happens with the second. Next thing up, Solar Ash, Heart Machine's follow-up to the beloved Hyperlight Drifter, was originally set to release October 26th, so not far from now, but is now being delayed to December 2nd with the official statement saying, quote, "We want Solar Ash to shine, and we need a bit more time to get the last pieces of polish and bug fixes into the game," end quote. That's not a big deal. Not surprised, but you know, we continue to see that the pandemic is being a issue and people worrying about getting things done in time when you have to constantly think about people going down if in case anything happens. So kind of where we are right now. Next thing up, though, unlike the Dragon Age we got going into PS4 generation, so Dragon Age Inquisition, it appears that Dragon Age 4 will not be released as a cross-gen title, but rather a next-gen and PC exclusive. EA seemed to be pushing toward this, if you realize, because Dead Space Remake also was confirmed for next-gen only, and I think they've said that Skate, the new Skate game, is going to be next-gen only, which actually leads me to an interesting thing, because Chris, you are, I think, a Dragon Age fan, right?
I do like Dragon Age, yeah.
Okay, and of course I know you're a BioWare fan in general.
I am.
All right, but do you see this as confidence in the game and that it can actually be somewhat soon, or do you think that this is just a result of the game being like a 2023, 2024 game?
Yeah, I think it's that, because that's what I was going to say when you mentioned Skate. I'm like, yeah, that might be a next-gen game, like PS6.
Considering that it just started development after they, what, 6 months after they announced it, we finally got the team together and we're making the game.
I can't believe they did that. I can't believe they said that. Oh
they could not suffer one more E3 of people going, no Skate 4, you guys suck. That's what it was.
They've gone so far and tried so hard that in the end they should have just never made the game.
I was going to say that. They just stole it from me.
But yeah, I think that the big thing here is, I mean, I appreciate the EA are coming out and saying this. I think every company should just go ahead and say, hey, this will be next gen only, or this will be that. Even if there's the thought process that the expectation should be there to a degree. But like Dead Space, part of the reason that Dead Space is next gen only is, of course, because of the fact that we're not going to be playing Dead Space until probably 2023. And we're probably not going to be playing Dragon Age until 2023. We're probably not going to be playing the next Mass Effect until 2024, if not later. So, you know, that's kind of where we are. It kind of sucks that news is such a way with gaming now. And I mean, we, I guess, feed into that some, to where we know about a game starting development before any real thing is done. And then it just feels like you've known about this game for 5 years, which is not uncommon. Games have taken 5 years to make in the past, but we know about them for the full 5 years instead of only knowing about them for the final 2 or the final 1.5. Or, you know what I mean? I just feel like by the time we see Dragon Age 4, I'm going to be like, finally.
Yeah, right.
That's just kind of where we're at with. I feel like companies are in this weird thing where they feel like they've got to get out and say something before leakers can. Right? It's like if we could just tell people that we're making Dragon Age 4, then we don't have to worry about somebody leaking that we're making Dragon Age 4.
Right, exactly. That's kind of how I would see it, yeah.
It's kind of hard to get mad at developers sometimes for being a little too early doing that stuff when you have to think about the fact that we're over here like, did you hear that this got leaked? Did you hear that this got leaked? So we feed into that system some. Next thing up, though, for the United States, PlayStation have made a website where users can sign up for a chance to be invited to buy a PS5 during restock next month directly from Sony. Users who sign up must have a PSN account, get one console per PSN account, and seemingly it doesn't guarantee a spot to first come, first serve, but rather based off of, quote, previous interest in PlayStation activities, end quote, which sounds like long-standing users with a history of being engaged with PlayStation are being given favor here. If you are selected, an email will be sent showing the time and date for your invitation and, of course, the expiration of it for you to move forward with your purchase. All right, Chris, what's so funny? Let's hear it.
I hadn't read that part of the quote, and that just makes me think like there's some dude who's like, oh, this guy has the platinum in PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale on Vita. He's getting a PS5 today.
Well, dang it. Too bad I've already got a PS5. I could stack up, boy.
Holy crap, this guy's got Tokyo Jungle on his list. We got to give him one. He doesn't even have to pay.
Here's the thing. I would actually really appreciate that be that be how it worked. Is that every someone who sends an email in, there's somebody who quickly scans it and like, whoa, this dude's got the Bloodborne platinum. This guy's got Mortal Shell platinum. This guy has the platinum. Yeah, PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale is a perfect deep dig. Like, yeah,
right, exactly.
All right, well, they clearly love PlayStation. Why don't they have a PS5 yet? Let's help them out.
Our internal numbers say this guy spent a lot of time playing Spike. We got to give him a PS5 for his trouble.
So, real question on this for you guys. I've seen some people be mad about this, right? And say like it shouldn't be this system. It should just be first come, first serve. And there's clearly value in that. But Chris, like, do you think it's a bad thing that Sony's like looking and saying like, hey, we're trying to cater specifically to people who are already part of the PlayStation?
No, and you want to know why? Because for the last year and a half, we've been complaining about the first come, first serve aspect of buying a PS5. If that's what you want, then you can't complain about the scalpers. Exactly. They're trying to help you, and you're complaining about it. I don't understand.
Yeah. And that's the thing is like, I get that. Like, right. If you've been an Xbox player and you're excited to jump into PS5, but you don't really have a history with PlayStation, so they don't choose you. Okay. I understand, but for the majority of players and for the sake of business, Sony would want somebody who they've seen has a history of buying with PlayStation, so they know that when they sell them the system, it's not a dead-end purchase. It's not, they don't make the $5 off the console that they make in profit and then you don't buy anything else. They're like, okay, he's probably going to buy 2 or 3 games a year, which means we'll make this much money off of this one console. Bam. You know?
It probably would have been better for Microsoft if I had never bought a Series S. Right? Like, I don't even buy things on that thing. I don't use it. So they would rather give it to someone who would. That's just the same thing here.
Yeah. I mean, it's the nature of business. So it's, to a degree, it's what you deal with. Next thing up, after a swift round of legal action from Sony against the first company selling custom faceplates for PS5, if you remember, it was before the system even came out. dBrand came on the scene saying their design being original should stop legal action from Sony because the last one was like an exact mold of Sony's, if I remember correctly. And then dBrand, of course, dared them with a, quote, try and sue as tagline. For months now, it's worked. They've been available since February and sold out like really quickly. And they just came back around after kind of coming back in May, selling out again.
They're hard to get.
They're very hard to get. And what's going on now is Sony have issued a cease and desist to dBrand for their dark plates, asking the company to comply instead of moving immediately into court to resolve the issue, which of course is what dBrand was kind of goading them with. So here's a big thing here. I think 2 things is going on. I try not to cuss too much in this, but I think there comes a point where Sony need to shit or get off the pot, or they need to just stop worrying about people who are making something that doesn't affect their sales. And actually, I love the way that dBrand went about this. dBrand said this would be like a car manufacturer trying to tell you couldn't buy third-party parts to replace something for either visual aspects or if you wrecked your car and needed a replacement part.
It's 100% what it is. And it's infuriating because here's why. dBrand, anything I've ever bought from them has been of the utmost quality. They are kind of expensive for what they are, but I can tell you right now, they have high quality items. I've been trying so hard to get one of these. I'm on a mailing list and I couldn't even get one.
Yeah.
They become available and within an hour they're sold out. And more than likely, or more times often than not, I'm at work and I can't immediately see them. They better come out with something great for doing all this, because like, I want one so bad just to have, just to change, just to make it black. That's all I want.
Well, like I was telling Saul yesterday, right? We were talking about this, and I think the weird thing here is that Sony would clearly have some intent of using this design. Otherwise, why did they spend the time making a design with removable plates, right? And if you're there, I tell you, I would have honestly thought that Sony would have had plates ready to coincide with the release of the new DualSense colors. I would have thought that they would do that. It's low-hanging fruit, but it makes the most sense, right? Hey, alongside the Cosmic Red DualSense, we have Cosmic Red matching plates. Or alongside the whatever the black DualSense name was, we have black matching plates. And if you want to mix and match, then you can get a black controller with red plates or a red controller with black plates. There's zero reason. And if I was them, that's exactly what I would do. Every controller color that you come out with, you do a matching plate. They're cheap to make. They're easy to put out there. And then guess what? If you really, at that point, I still agree that there's no reason third parties shouldn't be able to make the things. But at that point, if you want to tell me that a third party option is going to be sued, then at least I know that I'm left without zero options. What you're leaving everyone with who wants something like this is either to pay someone to customize their existing PlayStation and risk messing up the stuff they have, or somebody to try and mold the things. It's non-reasonable alleys for this stuff. So that's kind of where I feel like we are right now. And you know, it's unfortunate.
It's funny if you go to dBrand's website and you go to the dark plate section. They've changed it to now just all the articles of telling them what this that have Sony threatening legal action as the headline in there, kind of just showing you. And it's a lot.
Yeah, and it's funny because they said like we're giving into the tyrants for now, but we may come back around. Or I think they said terrorists.
I don't know if they said terrorists.
Dude, I was laughing at the way dBrand handled it because they're like, you either die having a dark plate or live long enough to become a scalper.
Dude, they have, it's all marketing at the end of the day, but it's like the Discord they have between them and like Linus Tech Tips is hilarious.
Yeah. I mean, it's a smart way to go about it. And this is the kind of thing where like, if they make enough noise and get enough movement, then Sony's going to feel like a fool. But the thing is does Sony really care about feeling like a fool in the public eye if they're still raking in all that money? But that leads me to my bigger question. I don't see right now, when they have no alternative on the market, how this is affecting Sony's bottom line.
Okay,
at all.
but hold on. I have a question about this. I don't mean to be this guy again.
No, go ahead.
dBrand knowingly made a product that they could get sued over. Literally taglined it, according to you guys, try and sue us. Yep. Now they're whining that they got sued.
No,
they didn't get sued. They got cease and desist,
and they're not whining really.
Yes, they are. Look at Reddit. All of this is complaining about Sony. All of this. They're complaining that Sony's upset.
No.
Is that people or dBrand?
I'm reading it. It's dBrand official.
Okay. Wait, are you talking about the main thread? Because I have that pulled up here, and
dark plates are dead. Thanks, Sony. They're pointing out that Sony is telling them to stop, which they knew by when you're taglining, please sue us. That is absolutely whining about getting what you deserve.
Sony is whining. I think that's a little stretching it. Because if you read through the thing, they're pointing out things that actually are incredibly like helpful over this kind of stuff. And that's like lawyers representing Sony Interactive Entertainment. Naturally, there's a lot of things to unpack, including consideration that Sony might want to send Netflix a SND over Squid Game for specifically stating that they use the symbols. Ford F-150's rights of repair, speculation over Sony's upcoming product launches, and quotes from cease and desist that they've received. And they go on to list all those quotes, which now that's a lot of damage. But this is, if you actually go through and read everything, this is 100% a well thought out post.
They still said try and sue us.
Well,
that's just part of their marketing. Their marketing.
So, well, hold on, Chris, because look, I get where you're coming from in that, right? But I think the difference here is, like I mentioned at the beginning of the news article, the company that originally did it, it was an exact replica, of the existing plate. The dBrand one is not. It doesn't have the same matching texture as the actual PlayStation one on the bottom that I'm aware of, right?
No, it's literally
it's a texture, so it looks similar.
It's a matte black piece of plastic.
Yeah,
that just happens to fit into the PlayStation.
Yeah, but it actually has a slightly different curvature, different shaping. That way, it's not, because the problem with the original one is that it was an infringement of a design of Sony. dBrand's is not. It doesn't have the exact.
Somebody said thanks, dBrand. They could get a dark plate, but they couldn't get a PS5, so they put it on their Xbox.
But yeah, I mean, Chris, I get what you're saying when you're doing this. I agree with Saul. It's clearly just edgy marketing. It's also saying come sue us. But realistically, I think it's that dBrand doesn't want to deal with the fact that they could probably go to court and win this. I'm pretty sure they could. This is an original design. It doesn't infringe on what Sony's doing. It's just that they don't want to deal with the legal costs of having to go and do that.
It's the fact that Sony has the funds to be able to drag them through court for years and years and years on this, and they don't have that kind of money. It
kind of reminds me, right, of this time, and this, of course, it's not the exact, but it reminds me of a time where the game that's coming out, Pray for the Gods, that is a Kickstarter game I backed on. Originally, it was called PREY to the gods, and then Bethesda just came and were like, hey, little studio who has no means to do anything, we're going to tell you that your name of your game being Pray to the Gods infringes on it would confuse consumers into thinking that this is a sequel to our Prey franchise that we own, and so we're going to ask you to change the name. And of course the developers has to be like, we don't want to waste Kickstarter money to go to court, even though we would very likely win, but you could drag us through court long enough that we would go bankrupt. So instead we're going to use our Kickstarter money and just change it to the squished AE symbol and go on about our day. You know what I mean?
Sure. I don't agree with you guys at all, because I'm reading this entire thing and they're literally talking about conspiracy theories, but it's fine. I get it.
To be fair, I don't have the Reddit thing.
As far as conspiracy theories go, this is much closer to Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself than the COVID-19 vaccine has microchips in it. Like
that's just their edgy humor, though. That's just how they are.
I don't care if edgy humor doesn't make it right. And I'm not even saying they're doing anything wrong, but I'm saying when you go and you say, come and sue me, and then they sue you, that is your problem.
They're not suing. They're cease and desist.
They will sue them if they keep going. That's why they stopped.
Right.
Under threat of suit. You cannot complain.
Yeah. But actually, you can't complain. That's the whole right to free speech, ain't it?
That doesn't mean I have to have sympathy for you and I have to sit on this podcast and be like,
can't say they don't have the right to
sucks for them.
Oh, I don't think it sucks for dBrand. I'll be clear right now. I just think that looking at it, because I've never bought a single thing from dBrand.
Yeah,
ever. I like zero allegiance to that company,
because if you're going to buy a skin online, it's a toss up whether you're going to get a very cheaply made, shiny, terrible skin, or you're going to get actually high quality. Brett knows that if I have something like a handheld, I don't have it with this phone, but every handheld I've ever owned has had a skin on it. And I can tell you right now, if you buy a skin off of Etsy or Amazon, it's a gamble on if it's going to be of any decent quality. But if you buy one from dBrand, it's pretty good quality.
Yeah, I have zero interest in dBrand. I just think that looking at what actually is going on, there's no real reason other than them just not wanting to deal with the legal costs. They would win this.
Yeah, they're making good points about the way forward is doing their right to repairs. They're making good points about the fact that Squid Game is using actual symbols through their thing, which is that's kind of up in the air. They wouldn't have anything. Kind of
I would even argue.
action.
I think the problem with that is that they said specifically that they got the inspiration from PlayStation, but I don't think that you can necessarily be like a triangle is a shape. You can't own a.
But
actually,
there's a difference there where that's an homage. Whereas I know for a fact, because Collins talked about it, they tried to use the Sacred Symbols logo in Hybroxia or Twin Breaker and weren't allowed to because of Sony.
Because it has
exactly, that's what I'm saying. Having a triangle, a square, and a circle on a business card, not in colors, is not. Those are shapes. That would be like suing the guys with put the circle in the circle and the triangle in the triangle. You can't. do that.
But here's a slight difference between those two things, though, right? Is that Hybroxia was releasing on PlayStation, and PlayStation saying you can't release this game on our platform if you're going to put that in there. They could probably release anywhere else, and then Sony could go, "Hey, cease and desist, change this," and then
it's not an Xbox either.
Oh, exactly. But the point in general is that if they wanted to, they could have put it in the Xbox version. And then Sony could come to them and say, hey, cease and desist on that. We think that looks too close to our thing. And then Colin could go to court and he would very likely win. The only problem being that he doesn't want to waste the time, energy, and money to go to court just because PlayStation has far more resources to do that. So that is a very similar situation. But I have no sympathy for dBrand. I have sympathy for people who wanted a dark skin not having an option from Sony.
I'm not saying
that's my crux of my argument here.
No,
I'm saying
I don't think you guys are. I just find what they're saying ridiculous. Like they're trying to make themselves look in the victim when they invited this on themselves in their taglines.
I don't think they're trying to make themselves the victim. I think what they're doing is they did this on purpose, especially that tagline, to bring a light of these problems that they are now like trying to work out and tackle. Like that's like the whole right to repair stuff, the whole like copyright stuff, like I think it was done purposefully to bring light to that. This is an issue that because of the original time they did it and got taken down. Now the new time they did that intentionally. They're a business. They're not going to put out Sony come sue us without thinking. They have lawyers on staff. They know that that's not a smart thing to do unless they're doing it on purpose for some reason, which is what they seemingly did. Like
the thing that you're talking about, and I actually think there might be something to that. And who knows? If not, then dBrand had a strategy here, I'm sure.
They absolutely
but this actually kind of reminds me, and it makes sense. It reminds me, there was a British dude on some British talk show. I barely even know about this, but I just remember it got some kind of headline thing. He went onto a talk show and somebody brought up that he doesn't like single-use plastics or whatever. And they're like, but here's a picture on your blah, blah, blah of you having a single-use plastic bottle. And then he walked out of the show, like got mad. I was like, this is ridiculous. This has got you, blah, blah, blah. And then he walked out of the show.
That wasn't a British thing, was it?
And then the next day, he goes on the show and says, okay, this was something we planned in advance with the show. Not everyone knew about it, so that it would have some believability to it. But this was on purpose because we couldn't get people to look seriously at the issue of single-use plastics if we didn't bring drama to it, which brought more eyeballs to it, so that we can get more people to realize the issues of single-use plastics. And it was all a marketing stunt. And I could see dBrand doing this as like, hey, we're going to use this because we want to bring light to the fact that the aftermarket customization market for consoles is fraught with issues because more powerful companies are trying to lean their weight into something from people that could otherwise win if they had the matching resources.
Yeah.
That's probably what's going on. And I think that's reasonable. I mean, yeah, I think that clearly dBrand is choosing a very interesting style of like, hey, sue us. And then the edgy humor stuff. I do agree that that all just seems like humor stuff. But to Chris's point, yeah, I mean, if you invited all this, but it does kind of seem like they're saying like, this is just to bring light to something. But
yeah, because like
I have zero sympathy for dBrand.
One thing that you have to kind of like in a way agree with that a correlation is like this is what the first design was that got taken down. It's literally like it is a circle, a square, and a triangle.
It looks like a pizza, a cracker.
It's all their own original design.
Yeah.
And it's like those are just shapes. And it's literally the exact same shapes that Squid Game uses on their business cards. And yet, like, there's an issue there, right? Like they got taken down originally for this. The only difference is this was being made to be put on a PlayStation product, which has no correlation to the symbols itself. That's their own original design. You could actually, it's part of a robot thing they have, which is pretty cool.
It's funny because realistically at that point, right, if it's about worrying about what people do on their PlayStation, have you seen people actually take the side plates completely off of their PS5?
No.
Yeah, I've seen people just have a blank PS5. They're like, yeah, I don't even keep the side plates on them because it makes it smaller. It looks hideous. Oh, it looks bad. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, we'll see what ends up coming around, but we're just in a weird spot with I feel like gaming is hitting all these spots where these legal issues have been worked out in other industries, and it's just coming to light in a more severe way. But we'll see what ends up happening. I think the last thing here we have for news is as a way to celebrate 5 years of PSVR, Sony are giving PS Plus members 3 extra PSVR games as a bonus starting in November is their wording. So that sounds to me like they probably will be parsed out throughout multiple months. So we'll probably get one in November, one in December, one in January. But they also may just do a couple weeks apart. Who knows? I'm also curious to see what games it ends up being. They put a list of the most popular games, and it'd be interesting to see if they try to pull from that or if they try to pull from other games that aren't as popular.
Did you delete that?
No, I didn't. Why?
Where'd it go? Oh. Okay, my bad. I'm lost.
But yeah. So it's cool to see PSVR coming around, but I'm at this point where as much as I love my PSVR for the times that I've used it, it's so frustrating to just pull it out and use it and try and hook it up. And then like Chris having issues with the connector. I've not used my PSVR in over a year now. And sometimes I lament that, but really I'm just more excited to get into one that's hopefully a lot easier to hook up, which is what it sounds like PSVR 2 is, and way more robust in how it connects. Because there are times when you be playing and you'd be like, oh, this is really cool. And then suddenly you're like, it's like calibration error. And you're like, oh, you piece of shit, It never got too bad, thankfully. But there were moments, So anyway, that's the end of news, which means we're going to go ahead and run over into the community's take, which was not as hot here. Chris, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I was going to say, I actually sent you a news item. I don't know if we want to go too into it, but a Sony investor says they have $10 to $13 billion to spend on acquisitions, and they're moving towards an inorganic strategy of building growth because of Microsoft.
That's all conjecture. I don't like that article at all because
I mean, it's
an investor who's saying this. Anybody who has capital could be an investor, so there's no weight to anything he says. He's not in investor meetings or anything like that. I actually was reading a Reddit article about how they broke down about how this is like kind of just all like it's what this guy kind of wants, but like there's no weight to anything he really says because there's no proof anywhere that they have that much to spend on acquisitions currently.
Well, it doesn't make sense, yeah, because they don't have a ton of cash on hand. But
right, that's why I was like,
I guess that's why it would have to be investors, right? The funding for these moves would have to actually be being pushed in through advance from investors, since the company itself doesn't have the cash on hand in order to make these a reality, right?
I think that's how that would work. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess if it's coming around and you're going to the board of investors and you're saying, listen, we need this much money to remain competitive so that you can actually continue to see gains from your investment in this.
But even
we need you to up your initial investment.
What is that board of investors called for companies that do that? That have like, it's majority shareholders who have that. But what is that called? Is there a word for that where it's like the top 30-ish to 40-ish to 50 people that actually have that power?
I would have just called the majority shareholders, which, I mean, I don't know if there's a better word for it than that.
I thought there was.
No, but that's what they're called, majority shareholders, board members.
I mean, yeah. Because typically as a majority shareholder, you have some kind of place on a board. Somehow, some way.
Yeah, so, I thought this was more in depth when I read it, but apparently I was wrong. So,
well, even like as a thought process, right? Kind of looking, I mean, to some degree, there's truth to the idea set forth in this article that to some degree, you're going to have to start moving more quickly toward acquisitions, because if you don't, the companies that have more money to make that are going to slowly but surely lap them up. Yeah. And you're left with either try to find who you can to acquire or try to build that talent out internally. And of course, it's always easier to acquire a company than it is to try and build one out, because there's so much. Like, we've seen them try to build things out and it fall, and we've seen Microsoft try to build things out and fall. And I think Microsoft actually kind of got to the point where they're like, it just makes more sense to go out and buy existing companies who we know do good work and give them budgets that allow them to do something with us in a big way. You know, the big part here is what do we see Sony really go after? Like, what companies are truly untouchable? And when you get a company like Bethesda get bought out, it kind of does start to shake you, where it's like, man, maybe everything's to some degree touchable, right?
Yeah.
I think there's ones that just won't sell. Like, I don't think Ubisoft will sell. Ubisoft fought so hard to avoid, that Vivendi takeover.
Who?
That I don't. Whenever Ubisoft and Vivendi, Vivendi had bought up like large shares of Ubisoft, and were trying to basically take over Ubisoft, and Ubi had to like go out of their way to try and get their shares back slowly but surely, so they wouldn't have to risk a company takeover. I don't think Ubisoft has any plans or wants or desire to be pulled in by someone else. So if you look at like the sheer scope and size of an Activision, of an EA, and of a Ubisoft, I think those three may truly be untouchable. And they, unlike Bethesda, they weren't privately held. They were openly traded. So when you look at all those things, I think there's less of a reason for them to sell. I think Square arguably is getting around there. You can look at things like 2K and whatnot, but it still kind of goes through. It's like, what could happen? Like, you know, could we see smaller scale acquisitions? Like, if you wanted to argue, like, could we see Microsoft buy out all of the Western developers from Square? I think it's possible. I could see Square being like, yeah, screw it. We don't really care about Crystal Dynamics or any of these companies anymore. We're just going to stick with our Japanese stuff, because sadly, their Japanese stuff is what's, or I say sadly, I mean, it is. But for Square, the Japanese developers have actually been the thing making the money this past generation. Whereas almost everything Crystal Dynamics has done has not really been like a huge
supplemental
success. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I definitely see where it's coming from, but that's a lot of money, and that's way more money than Sony has.
That's a ton of money, and that's not enough money either.
Yeah, I mean, depends on what you.
It depends on your acquisitions, right? Because like I would really argue that in many ways, Insomniac being acquired for $220 million or whatever it was is insanity to some of the purchases that have been made from other things.
True, but it depends on their value at the end. Like, how much are they worth now? I wonder.
It's true. How much do they want now versus where is each company going to be at?
Think if you were going to buy current Insomniac, you'd be looking at $1 to $1.5 billion.
I think so. As billion?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I agree to that.
I definitely think it'd be up close to $1 billion. I don't know about
Spider-Man,
1.5.
Wolverine, 500 employees.
Yeah, the irony that they
Sunset Overdrive.
They bought Insomniac Overdrive after Spider-Man, and its massive success is crazy enough for the deal they got. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'd almost bet they got points on those games too.
Yeah, like, hey, this is part of our move towards looking at acquiring you.
Yeah, but I mean, in this article, they talk about how Sony last year had $44 billion total on hand. And quite frankly,
for acquisitions or for anything?
For just on hand money.
Okay.
Cash on hand for 2021 was $44.081 billion.
I think what this looks like to me is them buying them going to Kadokawa and being like, we're already 1% invested in you. We're just going to buy from. We're going to just do that stuff. That's
Dude,
what I think.
if they like when we look at like smart acquisitions, I think Sony and From have enough of a relationship going far enough back that it's a sensible acquisition.
If they bought From, I would 100% believe that Bluepoint would be doing the sequel then. I would 100%. That would be the thing.
That would make it. I would think it was less likely if they bought
No,
From.
I would.
If they bought From,
hey, you're ours now. You're making Bloodborne too.
Well, that's the thing is like at that point. Well, it was Japan and From anyways, but they'd have Miyazaki on payroll.
I don't know. I'm telling you, man, it's gonna be Sony, PlayStation, Bluepoint, and From Software. That's the trailer. Another leaker has confirmed Colin's story, by the way. So that's 3 now.
I hope you're right. I just don't think you are.
Hold on.
No. Hold on. You're not talking about the Xbox leaker, are you?
Yeah.
If disregard him.
I don't care about him. He's the third person.
But he said Bloodborne's coming to PC.
It is coming to PC, 100%.
Okay, let's get done with this. Let's get done with this mess.
What are you talking about? Horizon's on PC.
Bloodborne's
on PC.
Uncharted is coming to PC.
Uncharted. Bloodborne is absolutely coming to PC.
But people have been, and this may be because they've been saying that for
$1,000. $1,000.
5 years now. They've been saying.
I raised the bet to $1,000. I don't even have $1,000. That's how confident I am.
Here's the problem.
You got some stocks there. You could cash out.
Yeah,
here's the problem with all this though. Is what time frame do we give this?
Oh, for the bet.
Oh, I have no idea. I don't know.
Because you can go to like 2026, and if that's the point, it's like anything could happen in between now.
How about we give it a 36-month window? If Bloodborne is on PC in a 36-month window, what is y'all's bet for each other that y'all are actually both willing to accept?
I'll bet my car. I don't care. It's 100% happening. I'll bet my dad's car. You can have my dad's Durango. You can have my Jetta. You can have my parents' house because it's 1,000% happening. I'm not worried about this
in the next 36 months.
You better 1,000% have them.
I'd be willing to make a bet that it's coming by the end of the year. Like,
dude.
Oh no, I'll take you on that bet right now. Bloodborne by the end of the year. You got 2 months, sir.
Come. We'll have a very fun.
Bloodborne PS5 and PC.
Wait, are you saying
in Halloween would have been amazing?
Announced.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you meant coming to, like, if it's going to launch on.
No, because if Uncharted was day and date with that announcement, I would be more willing to make that bet.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
we'll have to see.
I think 100% happening.
I don't have a problem, obviously, with any of this happening.
Look,
I actually
36 months from now, when it doesn't happen, Saul's just like Mr. and Mrs. Figueroa.
Well, no. At this point, it's where's my house?
I hate to inform you that your son on camera said that I could have your house, your car.
I never said I would. I said I would be willing. There's a big difference. I haven't shaken my hand on. I didn't even shake on the last bet.
Here's what's gonna happen. I'll be like laying in a rocking chair at like 66. I'm like, still no Bloodborne 2. Where's the Bloodborne 2 at?
I'll be dead, and they'll just be like, sucker.
Still no Bloodborne 2.
The day after Chris dies, Sony's PS22. They're like, for all the fans of the original Bloodborne, we are happy to announce Bloodborne 2.
Jim's Ryan's second child's kid.
Okay, let's get on to community's take here.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna hop over to the community's take, guys, and of course, as you may know, the community's take. If you don't know it, here's your time: is when we ask you, the community, for your thoughts on a question that we normally pose at the end of an episode to get your thoughts on it, either to push back on things that we talked about the previous episode. Typically, that's what we do, or some other idea that springs to mind. The one last week was based around Jim Ryan's gamesindustry.biz interview that he did, and where he said that the gate that consoles put on PlayStation games frustrates him. Now, that's not verbatim, but it's definitely in spirit of what he said. How do you think this quote could affect their strategy moving forward, and what would you personally like the future of PlayStation to look like? We got a couple of answers. I noticed that ones like these people don't jump on them as much because it's a big question. You know what I mean? So we have ShafeDog247 here over on our Discord. He says, here's your Shafe hot take of the week. Sony is planning on being a software publisher only by the end of this console generation.
Oof.
That is a hot. That is molten lava take. Right
I got
there.
crucified for saying the same thing about Microsoft, and that's actually more plausible for Microsoft.
And it's probably still not going to happen, but it's definitely more plausible. But bold, let's continue. He says, look at the devs that they have acquired this generation. They did it strictly to bolster their studio power. So when Ryan says he wants 100 million people to play PlayStation games, he means it literally. The difficulties in manufacturing the PS5 hasten this plan. So in about 7 years, you'll see the PlayStation Studios logo popping up on Microsoft and PC even more. You want Blue Point to remake Banjo and Kazooie? No problem.
Who wants that?
A remake of Jade Empire? No problem.
No.
You need those remakes ported to PC? Say hi to my friends at Nix's.
Say hi to
Each
Bloodborne.
piece of the puzzle has been placed carefully to make this happen. Oh, and I think they will leave Nintendo out.
That's the most ridiculous point of it all.
They're going to go everywhere and just be like, screw you, Nintendo.
Listen, if FromSoft gets bought by Sony, where is my
Look, you know why?
Where's my Miyazaki directed Mario at?
Look,
I would kill myself.
Here's your thing. Look, do you want to know the reason they leave Nintendo out? Deep-seated hate from the founding of the company.
Oh,
yeah. Very Japanese.
We will never forgive you for not agreeing to use us after we planned on it and instead using Philips. You backstabbers. That is exactly where PlayStation is here. Look, the thing is, I think, I'd say tell you, Richard, I think this is very bold.
It absolutely
I would be very interested to see if any of this comes true.
I'm not trying to be a dick to Shafe Dog here, but I would argue this isn't even a hot take. This has gone from being hot to being so cold that it sunk the Titanic.
I thought you were going to say it's going from so hot to wrong. Yeah, so, Richard, I actually, you know what? I could do an entire 1 hour conversation on what if this would happen.
Man, I tell you, this is a big thing. Here's the thing. Clearly, there is something going on, but you know what? There is a little bit of leeway here, right? The one thing, the end of this console generation. What if this console generation never ends? And that from here on out, we just keep seeing things kind of push on. What if there is no PS6? What if the idea of a normal console generation, kind of like Xbox has been saying, goes away, and even Sony does, and we don't really see that anymore? Then technically, you have a big window for this to come true, right?
Yeah, I don't think that's ever going to happen, though.
I don't think so either. But, like, you know, let's argue that Sony just says, here's the PS5 Pro. It's not a new generation. It's just like a mid-gen refresh. And then it just keeps becoming this refresh. Or they do the thing. Do you remember when there was a point in time where people were talking about the PS5 actually looking towards, and of course we know that not to be the case now, but looking towards being a... of course, my brain is failing me right now. But basically a system where modular, yes, where you could be like, okay, hey, look, you don't have to buy a PS6. Instead, you buy the PS GX Plus graphics enhancement for this system, and you just slide it in, and it's automatically made to work with everything inside of this.
I think I brought it up with that episode, but isn't it weird how that's the thought process for everything futuristic now? Phones.
Yeah.
And phones actually started it. Like the phone, you can actually buy a phone that does that.
Kind of, sort of. It's still not ubiquitous across bigger companies,
right?
But there have been ideas like even a while back, like right when we first started the show, a little bit after, they came out with the Essential phone, where it was like, you want a better camera? You literally, there's a magnetic connector in the back, and you smack a new thing on, it connects, and it sends that signal to your camera. It's a great idea, but you know, I think there's a lot of realities about the way that people buy things, use things, and manufacture things. There's a reason that consoles don't really do that as often. Like, why do you think we haven't seen the Nintendo 64 megabyte RAM upgrade really done more often?
Yeah.
Well, I think the hard drive stuff proved that this will never happen, because people are crying over Googling SSD with heatsink. You know, they're not gonna Google Sony GeForce 78 PS5 edition.
Oh yeah, dude,
it's not gonna happen.
I see now how, like, I attribute building a PC to adult Legos, and people are literally having pissy fits over a singular part of a PC build.
Yeah,
let alone anything else.
Yeah. I mean, really what gave it away for me a long time ago, while we're on that, is the fact that when I worked at GameStop during the PS3 era and the 360 era, people thought it was just so ridiculous that you had to open your PlayStation for like from the side for 2 seconds and remove one screw to put a hard drive in.
Yeah.
They were like, can you believe that they're asking me to do this? I'm like, dude, this is the easiest update you can do. And then for the people that got that, they're like, I don't understand how to put the update onto a hard drive so that I can then install the stuff. Really? You can't download a file to the only folder on a drive, plug it in, and it does the rest for you. Yeah, then there's no hope for modular systems because you have to account for the lowest common denominator, and there's just people that don't want to do it.
It's kind of like how I always talk about when people ask me how to cook something, right?
Sure.
And people think that maybe this analogy doesn't make sense, but it's working in my head. Where I just go, I don't know, I Google it and follow a recipe, you know? And there are just people who are incapable of that line of logic. And that's why you can't sell a modular console, because there are a portion of your audience who aren't going to be able to Google how this works. And they're either just going to buy a computer, you know, they're going to buy the wrong thing because they didn't look, and then they're going to get mad at Sony. And why would they want that headache?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Just look it up. You know, I don't have to tell you how to make frickin' rice. Believe it or not, it's on the back of the box. It's the same thing. You know.
Hey man, do you know how to make rice? Oh,
the big secret about being a chef is following recipes. Can you Google? Okay, cool. Then you know how to make a bourbon glaze. Like, it's not that hard. And that to me is the same thing. It's just look up how you do this stuff. And that people don't want to.
Those two things together get you where you need to be. Yeah,
of course.
Which I guess there is the argument to be made from people who are like, well, I don't think I want to do a practice round on a $500 PlayStation and a $400 SSD with a heatsink, but I don't think it's that complicated.
Yeah, but now there's YouTube videos showing how to
show you every step. You're right.
I could replace my engine in my car if I really wanted to off YouTube.
You
videos.
Absolutely could. I replaced my entire radiator by watching a YouTube video.
Yeah.
I said, okay, cool, that's easy. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. So, Shafe, man, hey, I appreciate the very in-depth thing here, and I would be interested to see any of it come true. So,
I'm glad you took the time to have a thought.
Oh boy. Okay. So Rude Days 93, he says, I think Jim Ryan is going to have PlayStation follow Xbox's strategy of having their games on PC and through streaming services. Streaming is where I really see them wanting to take off, especially in third world countries like Brazil, where it costs a full paycheck just to buy a console. xCloud recently launched in Brazil, and it overloaded the servers because of the interest in Brazil has in streaming. So first thing I want to say here, when I worked minimum wage, guess what? A full paycheck would have been exactly what I had to spend to buy a PS5, and I wouldn't even have money for taxes. So that's still true in America, big buddy. I just want to throw that out there.
And that's if you worked 40 hours that week.
Yeah, that's if I worked 40 hours that week, and I did. And my paychecks were $497. And I didn't even pay for insurance at that point. So
I've had
it would only be worse now.
I've had jobs where minimum wage got me like $144 a paycheck because of the hours they give you.
Yeah. So, I'll kind of look at that. A full-time paycheck there, ooh, that could still be the thing. But I do think bringing up Brazil is an interesting thing because consoles are very expensive in Brazil. And I guess what you could say is like a full paycheck for even not a minimum wage style job. And I could definitely see wanting those things to break out. But this brings me to a really interesting thing here Sony always perplex me in how they do these things. Sony has been first to market, or at least first to the market in the console side of things for so many things they just back out of just to see other people do it. Like a good example is people are talking about, xCloud is working on being able to be played on smart TVs as an app. Guess what? In 2014, there were Samsung TVs and Sony Bravia TVs with a PS Now app that you can open and select any game you wanted to and stream it directly from the app with your controller connected to the TV through Bluetooth or cable. And now we're seeing people talk about that again in 2021. And then streaming, okay? xCloud is like, we're going to have it to where you can stream your games to your phone. But not apparently, as I was wrong, thanks for Rude Days for clarifying, you cannot stream games that you own to your phone or any other thing on Xbox, just like PlayStation. You can only stream the ones that are part of the service, which I think is stupid, if I'm being dead honest. But that's okay. But with where we are right now, Sony did the exact same thing. PS Now was fully available on phones in 2013, 14 actually, when it first launched. It was on small phones, and it kept going. And then slowly you saw PS Now just shrink. It went from being on more and more and more things to every year it was like, we're going to stop supporting Vita. We're going to stop supporting phones. We're going to stop supporting laptops. Okay, we're going to bring PC back, and now it's just going to be PC and PlayStation 4. Okay. I don't really know why, but we've seen them kind of come here. So I don't know. My question here is, are Sony going to go back and try something they've already tried again? Because I feel like they've shown us time and again that they don't really like doing that. If they try and it doesn't hit whatever number or thing it is that they want to be a success, they don't tend to try again. Do you guys agree or disagree with that?
I agree. It's rare you see them try again.
Like, I'll tell you right now,
especially for failures.
If PSVR would not have led the VR market for as long as it did, I see zero reason that Sony would be like, okay, let's do a PSVR 2. They would just be like, nah, screw it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They would have never made Vita if PSP didn't sell 80 million units. Was there problems along the way and some issues with people hacking systems? Yes. But it was still a success. And Sony kind of looks at that and goes, okay, it reached a successful number in our heads. We're going to go forward. That really makes me wonder, do Sony really have the right leadership right now or the right mindset to go, maybe we were too early. We were too early to the show. Let's go back and try this again. And if we would have never quit, we may have been the head of this to begin with. It's interesting to think about.
It is.
Last one we have here, Josh Ayers. He says, I think it's just his opinion and means very little how PlayStation will act in the future, which is totally possible because not all things have to funnel specifically through him, but it clearly shows where he's going to be pushing, at least if he is a man of his words, towards the people who are fully capable of making those decisions. Chris, you had clearly something to say there. You want to chime in for a second?
Not really. I was just going to say that like he's the PlayStation CEO, so I think his opinion very much dictates how they'll act in the future. Mm-hmm. So I guess
of course, there are people that could push him out as CEO if they don't like his style and what he wants. But at least in the current setup, if he wants to push and he stays in that position, that push can happen. Josh's second thing says, PlayStation will keep doing what they are doing, which is games come to PC 2 to 3 years later, trying to sway people over to the console, just showing what games PlayStation makes, and they will do the same with mobile titles like the Wipeout games for mobile, trying to bring more people to the console. I do think to some degree that's what they've been doing, but I don't know if that lasts long enough. That's a genuine thing. I don't know. Let me say this. It doesn't last long enough to do what Jim Ryan says he wants, right? There's no way that you can keep the traditional console manufacturer ideology and move toward the hundreds of millions of people per game that he's talking about. It doesn't even happen on big games, right? I mean, like Grand Theft Auto 5 is one of the most successful video games ever, and it's at 100, it's at, over 100 million, but it's at 100 million players. And that's not common. I think to some degree, Jim is talking about two things. I think he's talking about wanting PlayStation to reach hundreds of millions of gamers, but I think he's also talking about wanting games in general across the board to be so ubiquitous and accepted by such a large group of people that they become like movies and music and all these and TV, to where pretty much every single person does them to some degree. And that's not where games are at now. Games are very profitable, make a ton of money, but we're still talking about a cap in the United States of, a couple 100 million players.
I got a question for you guys.
Sure.
That might be part of this. Do you see a possible future where Microsoft walks up to Sony and is like, we want Ratchet and Clank on Game Pass. Here's $100 million.
Sure. What about it?
Do you think they would do it?
Do you think Sony would do it?
Yeah.
Not for $100 million.
I don't think so for $100 million.
For Ratchet?
For Ratchet? Yeah, I don't think so.
Huh. All right, fair enough. I'm just curious because
look, I think it's now reframe the question through the lens of specifically one side of that, right? If you ask me, Xbox comes and says, listen, we still for some reason, and I say this as a big what if because we don't know right now. We don't have a lot of stuff. Let's say for some reason, Microsoft, after all these big games start to hit and they're still not consistently hitting nearly as hard or as big as Sony's games are, then Microsoft goes to Sony and says, is there any way, shape, or form that we can work on getting Ratchet or any of your other games on our system? And then Sony goes, I could see Sony potentially being like, you let us put PS Now on your system. You take a cut of the profits and then we control it on our service, just like what we've always talked about the inverse, right? We've always talked about Xbox's games ending up on PlayStation, and by way of Microsoft making some percentage of the subscription cost, and then letting people play on there. I could see the inverse happening, because I think Sony's goal is wanting their games on as many things as possible. I don't think that means that they want to do so with losing control of their titles. And it's not like they don't control the title, but it wouldn't be on their service. I think any way that it goes out, phones, TVs, whatever, is going to be through some way of a PlayStation-focused app that is designed for whatever thing that you're playing it on.
Fair enough.
And I think that the amount can change and vary, but I think it also just depends on where they're at financially for that at that time.
And if we're looking at that article a second ago, if they got $40 billion on hand, which is like a 48% increase from the year over year from before, I don't think they're doing too bad right now.
No, I'm more just curious, like, what if Microsoft and Sony would ever do that? Because Jim Ryan is basically, if what he's saying is true, then I think the best option is to be like, hey, maybe it's not something like Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, but maybe they're like, hey, you want God of War collection, and it's 1, 2, 3 and Ghosts of Sparta and Chains of Olympus. And it's like, okay, we'll put that on Game Pass, and then at the end of God of War 3, it has a stinger that's like, hey, play God of War 2018, an upcoming title, God of War Ragnarok on PS5.
Only on PlayStation?
Yeah.
Or only on things that are funneled through PlayStation?
Right.
Because I could kind of see that. I could see legacy titles eventually going, but I still think Sony's ideal situation for legacy titles would be to run them through their own service as much as possible. I do think there's a higher chance of it being, the last 10 years and on, you're only going to be able to play on PS Now, on whatever service, whatever device you're playing it on. But you could be like, hey, you can play Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, 3, and 4, or whatever it be. You can play, which is not Sony. Let's go somewhere different. You can play every Ratchet and Clank game up until Ratchet and Clank PS4. You can't play that one, but you can play Ratchet and Clank PS4 and Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart on PS Now, on Xbox, or on phone, or on TV.
Yeah, because that was always my argument for Virtual Console coming elsewhere. As just, you finish playing Mario World on your PS5, and then it's got like Mario Odyssey, or continue Mario's adventures on the Switch. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I actually think that would be a really smart move. That I'm assuming that there's reasons from legal standpoints or whatever why they don't do that, because my assumption is that Nintendo wants to be able to do what they're doing right now, right? They want to hog that to themselves so they get more console sales. But that's also sticking to this original business model. Right. Make it to where the Switch is the only system you can play these on easily, and then people are going to want to buy Switch. And then you're going to make extra money because you're charging more money for the version of online that lets you play these games, right? So then you kind of stack those two things together, and you have people running to Switch so that they buy into the console, buy more games, and then that's the traditional console strategy at work. But if in this idea of what Jim is talking about, it seems like the idea is to try and find a way to supplement the traditional console market. And it doesn't sound like he wants to completely get rid of it, right? Like you talked about, it sounds like it's going to be around forever, regardless. It's just, how can they get to the point where maybe the console isn't their main business model, but instead it's just it's a core part of it, but you could still play all these games elsewhere under the PlayStation moniker. And then you get accessory sales, right? Because you can have it to where you can play it on here so long as you're using a DualSense. You have to buy a $70 DualSense, but you can play it on your TV. Every game that comes out, playable on your TV now. Maybe.
Yeah. Don't know. Curious. It'd be fun.
We'll be curious. It would also be curious to see if they start to do that, if they stop letting third-party controllers work on anything except for the console. Like if you own the console, you can use the Nacom controller, you can use the Razer controller, but if you're streaming on TV, you have to use the official Sony controller.
Yeah.
And they could say whatever they wanted to, right? Compatibility concerns.
Yeah.
I think that Microsoft would be smart to do that, if I'm being dead honest. I think if it was like, hey, we have the Xbox One controller or the Series X controller, then we have our Series X adapter that all phones fit into that you can buy, and you have to use it to play the games. I don't think that anybody would really think twice about it.
No, I agree.
So anyway, I think that's the end of the community's take. Does anybody else have any thoughts on what our listeners said?
No, but I did want to kind of put something out there because we started doing something new. I just want everyone to know that I have been taking the community's takes and kind of cleaning them up and putting them in there. And I'm not trying to call anyone out. I just want people to know if they listen and they're like, that's not exactly what I said, just because I went through and cleaned up some English to make it easier to read. And I just wanted to put that out. I didn't want anyone to get like, oh, you completely changed the context of what I said. So
yeah, and then of course it gives like Saul the ability to read ones from Facebook that he doesn't normally see.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a good setup. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate you doing that. All right, so heading over, I guess now that we're done with the news and we're doing here, Chris actually talked about an article from the Wall Street Journal, or the Washington Post, sorry, not the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, that kind of talks about video game reviews. And the headline in question is, the video game review process is broken. It's bad for readers, writers, and games. Now, I think the best place to start here, guys, would be to kind of get some semblance of what the overarching theme of the article is. What is the article positing? I haven't read it. I think both of you may have, or at least Chris definitely has. Saul has an immediate reaction based off of the headline.
I've gone through it and glanced. Essentially, it's that I'll just say it this much. Quote, I played 25 hours of Far Cry 6 in 6 days between receiving the game and the embargo lifting. In that time, I cleared roughly a third of the game's map, though likely that amounts to less than a third of the game's story. Admittingly, I played at a lot more leisurely pace than many other reviewers. He says, in quotes, or in parentheses, surely he could have squeezed in 50 more hours of Far Cry 6 if he tried. He frequently paused to work, eat, and exercise and attend other obligations, unquote. So that's just kind of a way to get to you, a way to get to the meat of this article, is that it kind of seems that it's saying that with the way embargoes work and reviews work, is there enough time to play games in that? Is that at that point, does that mean that the review, if it's not played thoroughly, or if the game's not played thoroughly, does the review matter? Stuff like that. The opening question of the article is, what's the point of a review? No less than to answer a weighty question of how people ought to spend their limited time on this earth.
Well, there's a lot to unpack in this because it deals with so many different things, right?
It does.
First, it's positing the process of reviews, right? But the process of reviews and embargoes is very heavily tied to the state of how games have to release, right? Games are released hot. They choose a date and they're getting developed as close to the edge as possible, often put on the disc in a way with some bugs they know of that they're working on patching out in a day one patch. And that means that how quickly are you getting a version over to reviewers? So a game that's large, like Far Cry 6, in comparison to a game that's short and linear, like Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. That's a good example. These are two very different games, two very different links needed, and two very different things, because one's open and has a lot more possibility than one that's closed and has a very linear story and gameplay sections. So if you go to send somebody to compare them, ideally in this situation, you would send a code for Far Cry 6 a couple of weeks more in advance than you would have for something like Ratchet. But it would definitely seem, from looking at people who do reviews, that more often than not, reviewers are roughly given about a week for most games to try and slam as much as they can out of them. Sometimes they get lucky and get 2, but then you deal with this other thing, right? The rat race of trying to see how quickly can you get a playable enough version of the game for people to play for review that won't completely mar the review experience to where you end up with people reviewing the game more negatively than the actual physical release that comes down the line. And there's a weird sweet spot that I find in reviews where I don't want to say that I throw reviews out like baby with the bathwater kind of thing, but I notice that I'm far more willing to wait on a game and wait on a review from someone who just goes, here's the situation at hand. I don't feel comfortable giving a full review. Here's my quick review in progress, and I'm still playing the game. You will get a full review of my full thoughts when I'm done with it. And you can either make your buying decisions and time spending decisions, whichever one's more important to you, time or money, or both, based off of my half-written review that tells you where I'm at and gives you my honest feedback now versus my full thoughts. You can choose which time you jump in, and throughout a multitude of reviewers. I think the bigger problem is that most sites still do not seem to like the idea of a review in progress, or not saying, hey, we're not ready to review this, because of the fact that you're constantly dealing with competition from every other site. And if you don't put your review out on the day of, you run the risk of you not getting the hits you need to fund your site. And bam, that's the big loop of where at least my insides, me looking inside from out, seems to be the big problem of all of this cycle.
That is the issue. I disagree with the headline of this article, and the headline is the video game review process is broken. It's bad for readers, writers, and games. Only because at the core of the problem of reviews, it is the culture around them, and I mean that it is the culture of a game review to get the game, get it hammered out within a week really quickly, then form a thought process that's coherent enough to make an article about to put online. And that's not the way that it should be done. But at the same time, it's not the way that it has to be done. It's only the way that it has to be done for select individuals. I don't think that has to be the case in a majority of the ways. And I mean that with, there are plenty of YouTube channels that get by successfully who don't publish reviews the day the game comes out. It's weeks later.
Mm-hmm.
And
they're dealing with the same thing the websites are, just to throw it out there for people who may not know how that stuff works. The algorithm pushes channels who can get it out day one when most people are searching for it. It favors them. So waiting puts you at an inherent disadvantage, but it doesn't mean that you can't succeed.
Yeah, and sometimes these people don't even get the games before the embargo list.
Some people buy them privately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've talked about reviews before in an episode years ago, and my stance is pretty much the same. I think that there is definitely some like behind the scene. I don't like using the word crunch anymore, but behind the scene crunch that people have to do to get things out. And in that case, what?
Yeah, come on, Chris.
I just think it's hilarious that game industry journalists whine about crunch, and they're probably the worst about crunching.
The worst crunch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
He's saying that there was a large group of the games media industry who decry crunching while taking part in their own crunching.
Oh, I see. Okay,
significantly worse
within their own industry.
Yeah,
it's like, hey, you got to play Far Cry 3 in 3 days. Good luck.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's like I said, at the core of the problem of all of this is that's the culture behind all of this, and there are plenty of better ways to figure this stuff out and to go about doing it. And people have found it too. But at the same time, I think, and I've talked about this before, reviews are done with two different things in mind. One, you are a fan of that series and you're curious to how this game is going to lead out to buy it. Or two, you are a fan of the person talking about the series and you want to hear their thoughts on it.
Yeah, even if it's a game you didn't know much about prior to it.
And or even Colin Moriarty, we'll use him as an example. Let's say I love him. I'm #1 fan of Colin Moriarty in the world. I want to hear his thoughts on Far Cry 11, right? I may hate Far Cry, but I still want to hear what he thinks about it just because I'm a fan of Colin Moriarty. Mm-hmm. And that's how this kind of ends up working. I'm often, curious. Who goes to IGN the day a game comes out and looks at a review and says, I don't know if I want to buy this game, I'm going to read this review at IGN to see if I'm going to do it. What is the actual percentage of people that click on a review that have that thought process in mind?
The thought process of, is this going to change my opinion?
Am I going to buy this game day one because of this review?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's people who are a little bi-curious.
Ooh, boy.
They're tallying up different reviews to get
that's an Arrested Development joke right there.
To get their, you could turn it into a Scott Pilgrim joke by saying that makes me bi-furious. Yeah, I think that there's been times where I've been iffy about a game, and I go to ACG. I actually like him, and I respect him for his opinions and stuff like that. Then Skill Up, I 100%. Skill's probably my favorite person.
ACG was wrong on Days Gone. That's
100%.
I don't remember if I watched this Days Gone thing.
That's the only time I've watched a review and be like, this is not indicative of this game at all.
Yeah,
I've disagreed with him before, but it's still indicative of the game. This is true.
Well, anyways, but I think that it varies from person to person. And for me, we talked about this before the show of me and Chris have talked about reviewing games personally. In different ways too, writing, vocally, stuff like that. And for me, it's I'm doing this as a discussion on how I feel of the game, not to sell you on it, not to persuade you, but it's simply because I either did not like the game and I like the game and I have an opinion on it that I want to talk about. It's not even indicative if the game's good or not. Sometimes games are incredibly bad, and I'm just like, I don't even want to see this game ever in my life again. But as a reviewer, if I was being paid to, you have to give your opinion on why that is, right? And you're paid for that kind of opinion. The one thing I have a problem with this article at the same time is the thought process that this person has about the way he reviewed this game. He got this game 6 days between the embargo lifting. Right? That's an extra day on top of a work week. And he only played 25 hours of it. And then he says, I played at a more leisurely pace. You made this a problem for yourself. If you're a game reviewer, well, no. If you're a full-time game reviewer, isn't that your job to play this game and to get it? And if you got it to make a review, assuming he did, because he had the copy before embargo, a full work week and a day. He played it at his own pace. He even admits it is a leisurely pace, and then complains about not getting enough done.
Well, okay, so this actually goes back towards the thing, and this goes back towards what Chris was talking about. Is it complaining to just make a statement? Because Chris posited that dBrand was complaining by making statements about the situation.
This whole article spawned from this,
and this
whole article is a complaint on the review system. So yes, it's
a criticism. There's a difference between a complaint or a whine, I should say, because that's kind of at least how I took what you said when you said complaining is more of a whining. Where I think criticism is different, right? You leverage criticism as this is an inherent problem at hand. But I don't have to be coming at it from a whining situation, which I think is true of the dBrand.
I don't think a complaint is a whining situation.
Well, and I think that's a difference per person. That's how I took it.
I think a complaint and criticism go hand in hand. They could be something that could be addressed to be fixed, and that's what he's trying to do.
Fair enough.
But the problem is that it seems like the thing that could have been fixed is just the way he played it. Now he does make a good point. Oh, go ahead, Chris.
Well, I was just gonna say, isn't the point of his article that he shouldn't have 6 days to get through a game? Because I'll say it. I know Colin said it, so I don't want to sound like I'm cribbing off him. But nobody plays games this way.
No, they don't.
That's what I was about to say. If anything, I actually appreciate this article because he is actually saying the way I would play Far Cry 6.
Yeah.
In 1 week, I would maybe get to 20, and if I really heavily played it, 25 hours in 1 week. And that's exactly what he did.
The problem is that when you are a website hosted reviewer from IGN, GameSpot, whatever it is, you don't have enough time in the world to play games at the pace of a normal person. You are not a normal gamer at that point.
So isn't that what he's positing here?
That's the point,
the issue is that the way that the review system is currently structured doesn't actually allow people to review games in a way that would be similar to how a real consumer would play them. And so you're getting a hyper version of a play experience that may alter it negatively or positively in a weird way when the normal consumer wouldn't do that.
But that's the point of that I made earlier. That has nothing to do with that. That's culture. That's the culture of them having to crank out reviews.
Yeah, it's the culture of the review process currently.
Yes, and but that has nothing to do with the way this kind of review system works.
How would it not?
Because anybody can play Far Cry as long as they want. He could take 3 weeks to play the game and then pump a review out. He doesn't have
only if he gets the code long enough ahead of time for him to do that.
He doesn't. Who says he needs the code? There are plenty of people, like I said earlier, that are successful.
Though.
But why do they need a code? They're Washington Post. They're not IGN or GameSpot.
Right, but this is the point that he's making, and that I think me and Brett are kind of on the same page on, is he works for the Washington Post. The culture of game reviews says on October 6th, he has to get a Far Cry 6 review out. And Ubisoft sends him Far Cry 6 on September 30th.
Right.
That inherently puts him in a situation. I don't think he's saying I didn't do my job properly. If anything, he's telling you he didn't do his job the way it should be done. But what he's saying
he did his job.
His job is being done in a way that doesn't help anybody. I don't think someone's opinion on playing 25 hours in 6 days of Far Cry 6 is valuable, because I don't think that that's a real experience. Because I could tell you, I love Death Stranding, game of the year. If I had played my 50 hours in a week, I would hate it.
I would too.
So I think that's the point. And if
that might be Big Seth.
Did you message him?
Yes. I just said we're getting close to wrapping up, but that was like 10 minutes ago. I think he took that as come over now.
That's fine.
But he didn't text me back. Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
No, I just think the article, while I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying in the main, I think in terms of what the article is saying, it kind of proves his point, right? Is like his job requires him. No, October 6th, this Far Cry is coming out. My review needs to be done. I need to get through the game. And I don't think that's a valuable opinion. It's valuable in the sense of like, hey, I'm on the fence and IGN gives Far Cry a 9. All right, I'm going to pick it up. But I don't think that tells you anything about the true quality of the game, because it doesn't tell you, is this going to stick with you in a week? Am I still going to be score hunting in Returnal? Does the next update break it? You know what I mean? Like a review, especially a pre-release review, I think, which is a huge problem right now, is a pre-release review is not even really a review of the game that you're going to play. It's a review of the game you hope you're going to play.
Yeah. And that is an inherent issue in the industry that needs to be gone. Like that should never be a thing. But I think though that like if I had a job, and this is seemingly his job, this is the whole point behind this. If it's not, then this is I'm completely have a massive misconception of this article.
I checked. He reviewed Far Cry 6 for Washington Post. But I will say it's a review in progress.
And that's good that they allow them to do a review in progress.
Yeah, that is true. Because I think that there are certain websites that actually say, hey, we can't let you do a review in progress. Though I think most sites are kind of warming up to that, because it still gets you your search engine optimization hits for the release day. Because you have something out that says this and people can read it. It just, I think going back, and maybe I really do want to read the whole article. So I do want to clarify, we're talking more of something that we're coming up with ourselves that is stemming from a very small section of this article. Yeah. I cannot speak to what this person is actually writing and saying and what their even thoughts are, but from kind of the idea and the thought process that we're going through, right? The thought experiment of what are the issues that we three see with review process, and can they be changed, and how should they be changed? I think that there's personally a big push that can be made across the board to give more time to reviews so that they can actually be a real experience, because of the fact that I've read plenty of reviews that I just, by the time I play the game, I don't agree with them at all. And I feel like most of the time that comes from the way in which these games have to be reviewed. Also from the way, like I mentioned earlier, the way that games end up getting to reviewers because of this rush process that we're in, right? Like a really weird example of a game that was done way before it needed to be done, and it just got held because it was releasing with something else, was Ratchet & Clank PS4. And that's a game that had a really great review process because they had codes sent out way early. People could play it at their own leisure. It was just waiting for a movie. The game was in great shape, 0 bugs, 0 issues. Then you have games like Days Gone and Cyberpunk that are coming out in almost unplayable states. And then these reviewers are having to try and muck through what is likely to be fixed, try to avoid that from painting their opinion too much, so that they don't just end up giving a game on day one this thing of just, hey, we're going to give this game a 4 because it's super buggy. Whereas if the game released like that and stayed like that forever, then that's a true 4. Right. You can't really do that, right? So
it's like with Cyberpunk. They gave it all a 9, and then once it came out and people were bitching, that's when it changed.
Yeah. So I mean.
And what's interesting about this, too, is here's a problem that can be fixed. He reviewed the game, right? In the article, he says that, quote, I played at a more leisurely pace than other reviewers. Surely I could have squeezed in more or 50 more hours of Far Cry 6 if I really tried. I paused to work. So evidently his full-time job is not reviewing the game. So that's something that can be fixed there, is having more time dedicated in the career space to be able to do this. I think that if a game reviewer is a game reviewer and they are supposed to hit these deadlines, what else are they working on other than other reviews? Then they need to be pausing for, because at that point it's like you have me being a pizza delivery man and a head chef at this restaurant. Do I have enough hours in the work in the week to do this at a seemingly no schedule pace? Well,
you know, kind of while you're looking at that, I think an interesting thing, and I'm actually not the normal person for this, right? I normally play one game at a time. So what I'm asking for, if I was in this position, right, if I was working this job, what I'm asking for reviewers to have a more normal way of playing games, so it's true to it. I don't like playing other games between other games, but it's also because I work. Maybe I'd feel different about it if this was my full-time job. Hard to say. But for me right now, it would seem like that would be the thing. But, for most gamers, I feel like most gamers actually do juggle a few games at a time. So if it's more that, hey, we give you 3 different game codes 3 weeks in advance for each one of them, and we let you play them at your leisure, however you see fit. And then, of course, they have to have time within all this time to actually write the review, edit the review, make sure all that comes together well.
Right.
Then take notes and stuff like that for things that you want to come back into. There are things that add to time, but I do think in an ideal review situation, that would be what you would do. You'd be able to have one person do multiple reviews, but you give them far more time to play them, far more time ahead of time to get the codes. But a lot of that is predicated on the games industry really moving back from this idea of you've got to get a game hot off the press and out onto the things as quickly as possible.
Not to mention if he is the only person on this website that does this, and how many games a week come out, or at least within 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That is,
and I doubt he is for the Washington Post.
Yeah.
But it's a good thought process for very small websites who do only have a couple of people.
Yeah, or like single individuals like ACG or Skill Up or Colin. They all work on these games, and if there's a week like that tends to happen in like November and February and March where a month is packed, it's like that's a lot to like have to play through and get through. But the only issue with something like this is I'm not disagreeing with what he's saying. I'm just saying that there are ways to fix this, but at the core, you have to fix the culture behind it.
Yeah.
And that won't get fixed unless stuff like this gets fixed. It's like a cycle. It's a vicious cycle that unless the website culture gets fixed, the embargo culture is not going to get fixed. But you have to fix the embargo culture to fix the website culture. That's not going to get fixed until people stop clicking. Well, people won't stop clicking until you stop putting things out day one. So it's this cycle. Like it's all these dominoes that have to be kind of fixed at the same point.
Slow down there, Dane Cook. We got it. that was a dumb joke. You're good.
I don't know what you mean.
There's a Dane Cook stand-up special called Vicious Cycle.
Oh, that was a very dumb joke indeed.
I would argue that the bigger issue beyond anything else is that these websites don't have personalities. And I'm not willing to wait on an IGN review, but I am willing to wait on Carrick's review. Or
I agree with that, actually. Review. Yeah, because I agree with that a lot.
To me, and I think to everyone, and maybe this isn't fair, but I think their fault, not mine, is that these are faceless corporations. And that's why you get the whole, IGN said this about this game, and then IGN said this about that game, and it's hypocritical, even though if you pay attention, it's 2 different places, it's 2 different people, but I don't know who these people are. That was the big thing when you noticed the shift when Colin, Greg, Nick, and Tim left to start Kind of Funny and IGN, where at that point IGN was all personality based, and I knew those guys and I knew who they were and I followed their lives and I respected everything they'd said. So if a Colin review of a game came out a week and a half later, I would have gone to IGN specifically for that. But I'm not going to go for whoever the hell is writing in the trenches now because I don't know them. I don't care about them.
Yeah, and there are a few people who I really do still like their reviews. I like Jonathan Dornbush's reviews still for the most part. But you're right; it's few and far between in comparison to what it was. And this is indicative outside of game media, right? This is even true of Sony when people were lamenting the fact that the PS4 era started and it was all about PlayStation having faces, and then halfway through PS4 it was like, no faces, please. We don't let our people talk on Twitter. We don't let them have a personality. And that thing is a little less true of the media. Thankfully, the people have personalities outside of their day-to-day work. But yeah, you're right. There's definitely for these bigger corporations, and it's harder to put a face to it. But there's also this idea. Have you ever seen when there's like reviews that do 2 different? Like there's 2 different styles of reviews to me. There's reviews that are more op-ed pieces. And all reviews should inherently be op-ed, in my opinion. It really should be about you letting me on your world of how you view this. But have either of you ever read a review that the entire time you're reading it, you're like, this is just a review. This is fact. This is basically, this is what the game does. This is what the game does. And they seldom ever put opinion in it. There's a few people that do that, and it's far more efficient.
It's not valuable.
Is it valuable? No, not at all.
No, that's just marketing.
Yes, exactly. And that's, I've seen a few reviews that are like that. And I'm like, I can't say for sure that it is, but it sounds like someone paid someone to say these words.
In this day and age, because
it's fact.
That's what gameplay videos are for.
We had
like just pure gameplay videos.
Yeah, true.
So you could do that, make that determination yourself.
I mean, we had a leak on that gaming rumors website of the Crisis Remastered review guidelines. And it's really like, talk about how great the value is. Talk about how you can buy the game separately. Like, it's just ads. But that's what the thing is. That's what all of these are ads. So you'd think, at least to me, a day one review is just an ad. because you're not telling me anything.
I would much rather read or watch a 20-day-old, a 3-month-old, a 6-month-old, a 1-year-old review from somebody that is a 1-hour video, 45-minute video, or 45-minute video than something like that on day 1, week 1 at all.
Yeah.
Because I had a conversation with my buddies last night where I literally was just like, hey, if anyone's curious, Far Cry 3 is mediocre. I don't really recommend it.
6.
And yes, sorry. And that is more valuable to me than any single day 1 review that you could possibly have, is knowing that I've played it and just don't like it very much. Whereas,
and your friends know you.
Exactly.
You're a face to your friends. Yeah. That one sentence is more valuable than an entire review for certain people.
Yep.
Right. And then I can even say, hey, listen, the only ones I haven't platinumed on PS4 were 5 and New Dawn. So take that for how you will, and I don't think I'll finish this one. So it's all the context that I can give, you know what I mean, that makes it more valuable as someone who's played than a day 1 person who I don't know their face.
Sure. All right, guys. Well, I think we're going to wrap this up. It's been an interesting thing. So the community stake question, of course, is what value do you see in reviews, the review process as it is? Do you think that there's any changes that should be made that you think would make reviews something you'd be more likely to partake in, or that would make more reviews as a industry-wide thing something that's more valuable as to a handful of reviewers you may see right now? But, of course, we'll ask that on all of our social media. You can find us over on Twitter at TriangleSQRD. You can find us on Facebook in the group Triangle Squared, a PlayStation podcast. And lastly, if you want to support the show with more than just your time, which we're always so thankful for, you can head over to Patreon and give as little as $1 per month over at patreon.com/Nartech. So we also always shout out our patrons who allow us to do this show without digging into our own pockets. Thank you guys so much. And we will see you guys next week. Thank you, guys, for joining me.
Thank you all.
All right, guys. Shout out to our patrons, Ham and Egger, Bailey Robertson, Rob Wartpoint, Josh Drago, Mark Schutz, Cypher Primus, Kyle Grimm, Richard Schaefer, Rude Days 93, Joshua Lago, Landis, Zachary Sawyer, Kevin Bacon Bits, Luke Rabbit, Danny Villalobos, Solitary Red, Jehudi MD, Sean, Josh Ayers, Derek Porter, Corey Hickerson, Constantly Kenny, Matthew Green, Sean Santarude, The Stonard, Josh Jarrell, Steven Salazar, Shadowist, and my name is Dan.
Go Red Sox.